You're standing up. I just had to do it, right? Welcome, Tom. Welcome to all of you. I would like to think that we have really reached a momentous day, and Steve Alverson has declared he is staying here until we get this thing done. So,
and Steve Preminger and I made a deal we were going to get done early.
Fantastic.
Good. I like that. Okay. It's an opportunity for Steve Alverson to welcome you all. I'll shut up.
Just do a little preamble. Again, welcome everyone to the January 22nd Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable meeting. I serve as your facilitator. It is a facilitated meeting. My job is to try to keep us on time and on track. We only have one agenda item today, so hopefully that'll be good, and Anita's right and we get out of here early. I may interrupt if I need to make sure that we get back on track and keep going. Of course, we ask that everybody be respectful of everyone's opinion, and look forward to a great meeting today and wrapping this up. Thank you and welcome.
Okay. Liang, you are right here, and welcome. Oh, no, Rowena, yes, I'm sorry. I was looking at Liang's tag. We have some new members with a new year sitting in now. And so I'll let you get situated, Rowena, and it's my time to ask you all to report your name and city and welcome you. Starting with Glenn.
Glenn Hendricks, City of Sunnyvale.
Steve Preminger, County of Santa Clara.
Lydia Cruz, City of Palo Alto.
Anita Enander, City of Los Altos.
Kathy Watanabe, City of Santa Clara, and welcome.
Steve Alverson, ESA Facilitator.
Mary Lynn Bernald, City of Saratoga, Vice Mayor and Chair of this organization.
Lisa Matichak, City of Mountain View, and Vice Chair of the Roundtable.
Carlos Palacios, Santa Cruz County.
Rowena Turner, City of Montecito.
And welcome back, Rowena.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, let the record reflect that we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Favi, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Fabiola Garcia, Senior Advisor, FAA.
And Tom.
Hi, Tom Pike, District Director of Congressman Rocana.
And on the phone?
Hello there, Karen Chapman with Congresswoman Eshi's office.
And
Kathleen Lee with Congressman Panetta's office.
Welcome. Thank you very much for attending through the phone. I welcome you all again. As Steve has mentioned, we have one major item on the agenda today, and that is the work plan that the ad hoc committee worked so hard on to presenting to us. I'm going to give you an overview of how we got to today. At the December 22nd meeting, we actually accomplished and approved reviewing the strategic plan. Also at that meeting, we reviewed through action items 1.0 through 1.3.5. There was no, we reviewed them, but there was no public comment taken, and there was no overall discussion after that. So today's procedure or process will be the same as the December's meeting. It just gets a little bit more complicated because we will not be going item by item. We will be going the full work plan. So in that, as we did last time, the ad hoc committee, the three members, Lisa, Anita, and Lydia, will present however they have arranged to present the items. Steve Alverson from ESA will be responding with the changes and comments that had been made. I don't believe there was anything new added by you to what we had initially through the paperwork. I imagine, because we are elected officials, that we won't stay on track necessarily. I'm hoping to go through everything before we go to questions. But I think if there is anything at the time that the two groups are, ESA and the ad hoc, are presenting, and you feel roundtable members that you really don't understand what's going on or you have a question about something, I will entertain questions, but I'm not asking you to have questions at that time. I would like the entire work plan to be reviewed before we ask the questions. So it's incumbent on us to keep notes as to what we might have questions on if we can possibly. After that, after they have done their presentation, we will ask the questions. Then there will be public comments. I don't see a whole lot of you. We'll have to determine whether we can do 2 or 3 minutes. I'm hoping if we can be crisp and clean and get through this, we can give you 3 minutes because it's an awful lot of material to cover. And then we will return to the roundtable discussion as we did last time. And in that discussion, we can go through the items in any way that you want to. You can definitely add items, and we will be looking to prioritize. Especially, I'd like to say now, when we're doing the prioritization, I would like you to think what is impacting your city, but also think regionally, because it's very important for us to work together to come to regional consensus, because this body does represent the region of Santa Clara and Santa Cruz counties. It looks like we're getting even more information now. What I do want to note is that we have some table copies that reflect input from Save Our Skies and Quiet Skies, that it will be asking about items having to do with, they have questions regarding 1.0 and on. So I would like you all to look at what you have as table copies now and keep that in consideration as we go through all of this. Steve, is there anything else that I need to add?
Madam Chair, I would just mention that while we prefer to get all of the items that are going to be considered at this meeting for the agenda packet by 3 p.m. on the Friday before, given the fact that this is the work plan that's going to set the course for the roundtable for some longer term, we thought it would make sense to print these items out. I would encourage members of the public to please get things to us before the 3 p.m. deadline on Friday, because it creates a bit of a activity that is difficult leading up to the roundtable meeting, because there are other things that we're doing to get ready for this meeting as opposed to printing these things out.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, here we go. Seatbelts on. We're going for a ride. A good one, I hope, a scenic one. So, I will turn the microphone over to the chair of the ad hoc committee on the work plan, program plan.
And Lisa, if I might, I'll just mention that the work plan, as it was left in its last state on December 19th, is up on the monitors for everyone to take a look at. Evan will be modifying that as necessary as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you. So starting with where we left off last time, what we were doing is, if we were okay with the suggested edits, we're just going to skip those and then just talk about the areas where we had some changes that we'd like to make. So we left off, we finished 1.35, and at 2.0 we didn't have any changes.
Lisa?
So we're okay with the ones you
Can I
suggested.
just make a note here for us to come back to that, based on the input from the County of Santa Cruz, tentatively we would go back and add potentially the 3 items there as 1.3, 0.6, 0.7, and 0.8 in parallel to the kinds of things that exist prior in that section having to do with pirate and loop and so on. So that's just a placeholder note for now. And the question to you, Steve, would be, in as much as Westlaw 4 and Stick 4 both use the Cisco and eBay transitions and are both out of SFO, would it make sense to combine those, or would it be better to keep those as separate elements? Not looking for a final answer now, but just a thought.
I will think about it.
Okay, so starting with 2 point, yep. Well, actually, we didn't have any changes to 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. So on 2.6, if you recall, we actually decided to leave that there. That was the previous discussion before.
Okay. Would you just read the titles for the members of the audience who may not have?
So 2.61, sorry, is time-based flow management and its implications. And we discussed that last time, but just as a reminder, we are leaving it here. It had been moved to earlier in the document.
Yep.
And I wrote, okay with Steve.
Yep.
Okay.
So moving on to 2.6.1. And Anita?
Right, 2.6, so that becomes or goes back to 2.6.2, if we take the prior change. This is looking at GBAS and GLS at SFO. We'd agree with the adding the at SFO, but again, these, I think we'd prefer the implementation of GBAS and not review, analyze, and comment on. I think that's extraneous. We've been leaving these kind of just as topical headings instead of full action things. The rest of that is fine, and then the similar thing with the other technologies, take out the review, analyze, and comment on, and just leave it as other technologies.
Right, at the third level, we were just having the topic as opposed to what we might do about it.
Right. Right. And that was agreed, that approach.
And then we didn't have any input on, this is packet page, so that was finishing up package page 37. Packet page 38 we were okay with. And then we get to packet page 39 on 3.4.1, and that is the technical working group. And Lydia.
So in this here, this is on page 53. And
From the old packet, from the packet from December.
The new
Right.
packet is page 39.
Right, so depending on who's got what.
Right.
So the page on the actual program is 12. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
On the image.
Yes.
So the name over here is basically the Procedures Review and Technical Working Group. And the ad hoc committee kind of thought the name was a little bit too long and does not capture the scope. So it's not just procedures, but it also pertains and looks into technology, data, noise metrics, recommendations to the legislative subcommittee. So we would highly recommend to keep it simple and call it the Technical Working Group. And it would be consistent with what other roundtables have it as. San Francisco Roundtable has it as a technical working group too, so it would be consistent. That's the first point.
Can you repeat what page on the actual work program it is? Work plan?
12.
This is in the, where are you?
At the bottom of the page, it says 5 or 3.
12.
Oh, 12. He's over there.
Thank you.
Where's the voice coming from? Okay.
In the corner.
That is page 12 of the draft work plan. And it is
Right there.
3.4.1. Okay.
If I may, Steve, you your ESA had edited this?
Yeah, I think our only question about this was, what is this, group going to be charged with? Oftentimes, technical working groups are looking at a specific item, a technology or something. They get an assignment and they look at that item. As long as the assignments from the roundtable are clear, then a general technical working group should be fine.
We thought we'd start simple, because we don't know, we might need more than one, but for now, we thought one generalized one was a way to get launched.
So based, Steve, on your experience, what are you recommending then, or agreeing to have here?
Yeah, I think the technical working group is fine having that title. We added the words a procedures review because we're assuming that's been the bulk of what the roundtable has been talking about and interested in, and just trying to define it with a little bit greater sense. But as long as the full roundtable defines what a particular assignment is for the technical working group, it should be fine.
Good.
Thank you. I also want to understand in here the sentence "at the direction of the full roundtable." It's still on the same page 12. And at 3.4.1, when we go into the first paragraph, "at the direction of the full roundtable." So if I can understand, what would that encompass? Because the group seems to need to be agile and to have a fast track when something comes at us, when there's a date that needs to be fulfilled by. So if we could all understand, what does it mean at the direction of the full roundtable?
Sure. And the thought there is these groups are working to serve the roundtable, and that an item would come up. The roundtable, because there are different interests represented, different regions represented, that they would all agree that this is a topic that's worthy of the technical working group to go take care of and work on, and they would agree in a meeting like this, that's an item that should be assigned to the technical working group, and then off it would go. It has, technical working groups have potential budget implications in terms of the work they're generating, any involvement that we would have to support that group. So there would need to be some sense of what is it they're doing, how long is it going to take, what's their assignment, so that it's pretty well defined. So that's why it's at the direction of the full roundtable, as opposed to something comes up and then on its own, the technical working group decides to go work on this, comes back and reports, and the roundtable says, wait a second, we didn't ask you to look at that or ask you to undertake this work. And in the meantime, it's spent a lot of time and potentially money and effort on that without the roundtable's approval.
I guess the reason for my question is because the roundtable meets every other month. That's 60 days in between. If something comes up in between, there's really no way to get the full roundtable to agree for the technical group to go and look at something. And as a standing committee, I would think that the technical group is charged with knowing, when to reach out and to get to. So I would like to see that we have some sort of fast track or some ability in order to get the okay to go ahead and study a procedure, especially because 60 days, right, for the roundtable to meet. Then it takes 30 days for FAA to respond to anything. It means that it's going to take almost 90 days before we have the technical working group meet up to even have a discussion. And that takes a little bit of time in order for us to have the right questions, understand what we're looking at. So I think we need a more agile method. And, I don't know about other city councils, but in our city council, we have our standing committees like the policy and services and so forth, finance. They have what they need to look at, and they meet up whenever they need to. So I would think that maybe that's something that perhaps you can help guide us into formulating a way where we could have a fast track for the technical working group to meet and to get onto looking the process. I'd like to see a process. You can chime in.
Yeah, I think it's the surprise factor.
Yes, Anita? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve. No, go ahead, Anita.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of dealing with the unexpected that may have a short fuse and be technical in nature, where we would want them to get started. And again, I'd echo what Lydia said. Let's get a recommendation from Steve on how we can deal with that.
Okay, Steve Preminger has indicated.
Later on, when we talk about the subcommittees, I'm going to talk about the budgets for them, but that's not relevant now. I've never seen subcommittees that could act unilaterally, and maybe that's not what you're suggesting, but that everything, as far as I'm concerned, is advisory to the full body. So, I mean, maybe, Steve, you can come up with language that meets everybody's needs, but I'm just concerned that the final say, agile or not, is this body's.
Yeah, and we weren't meaning to subvert that at all. It was a matter of if the technical working group, as we think of it, is basically pulling together technical information and doing analysis and so on, that they'd have a chance to work if something came up. And then, yes, as Steve, as you're saying, any sort of final decision or recommendation has to come out of this body.
And I guess my recommendation would be twofold. One is to then narrow the scope of the technical working group. So there's certain items that it could address. I mean, for example, procedures would be one where it might be rapid fire. And so you would say that in the area of procedures, they could respond to those quickly. But I would suggest that it be done with perhaps the review of the chair or the chair and the vice chair, so that there's some designation of, yes, this sounds like this is something good to go out and work on, so they can consider also the budgetary implications of it as well.
Okay, but you can understand my concern when it comes to there's 60 days before we meet and so forth, and I appreciate
Steve.
question and making sure that, you know, we're within our designations. So I would love to hear, I mean, for you to come up with something that would make us a little bit more able to move fast.
And Steve Preminger would like to respond.
Yeah, I think your point about the 60 days is a good point. We are, you know, we only have a couple more meetings within the time frame of the budget that we've adopted. You know, parenthetically, that's why I think we should go for a longer period of time at some point to make sure that we still can do business, but perhaps the ability to call emergency meetings or something, because 60 days is a long time. You're right.
Thank you.
And that, yes, Glenn.
So I just want to check, is this one you wanted to hear, or were we waiting comments till later?
I didn't. I wanted comments later. We were just trying to scope out what the ramifications would be of all
Okay, I
of it.
guess I will hold my comments till later, like you asked for.
Appreciated. Thank you. But Steve, before we move forward, do you have any other thoughts, or can we wrap around at the end?
Madam Chair, what I would say is Steve is correct in terms of, I mean, this meeting in essence is a special meeting in that we met in December. We normally would have jumped over January and met in February. So the roundtable has the ability to set whatever meetings it wants at the rate that it wants. Again, budget implications to doing that. And I guess just in terms of this text, one potential change I would recommend is at the direction of the roundtable chair, and then have that go on from there. But again, I would suggest it would be a very well-defined task that the technical working group is taking on.
Okay, I think maybe we can keep in mind the sample of the requests that we've gotten from the members, community members, and also I imagine Kathy will be bringing it up that with the expansion of the San Jose Airport. I think that may be covered under here if we're sure to narrow our scope, as you have said.
With that, if there's no objection to making that change that I just suggested, then what I would suggest is Evan make that change so at the direction of the roundtable chair, and then delete the procedures review. Just call it the technical working group. And then same thing on the last sentence that's of that paragraph. It would be the technical working group, delete procedures review. Thank you.
May I ask also? So at the direction of the full roundtable chair and/or vice chair?
Yeah, and we
That's
would,
in our bylaws, that if you can't get if you
Can't
can't
reach the
get it
chair.
to the chair, it is
It's in the
vice chair.
bylaws, okay.
Mhm.
yeah, and I would delete the word full, Evan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First sentence. Thank you. Evan has the least enviable job today.
On the hot seat. Okay. Next.
Okay, so the same editorial comment we made about previous, like level threes, 341 is just technical working group as a standing committee, and likewise 342 is legislative committee as a standing committee. On page 12,
39.
39, and 53.
And would you repeat that again, please? So there's no changes that we're making, is that correct, to the one that we have now, or what?
We would leave it as the subcommittee had it.
I'm sorry, I'm still not understanding.
We previously, Lydia or Anita talked about 341 just saying technical working group as a standing committee.
Yes.
And we're saying 342 would just be legislative committee as a standing committee.
So we would delete the establish
A.
that was suggested so that we retain
We would delete those two.
Right.
the structure for the third level
Yes.
descriptors.
Correct.
Because you said form standing. Is that the reason behind
No,
it?
we don't have, no, in the third level, so like 3.4.1 becomes just technical working group, and 3.4.2 becomes just legislative committee. So we're not using action verbs at the third level descriptors. We're using them at the second level descriptors.
That's
Yep.
what I was saying, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And Evan, did you get that in the paragraph just above that?
Nope.
So remove the establish a procedures review and just have it be technical working group. Yep, I marked it over here. I just,
Perfect.
yeah.
And the same on the next section.
And the, yeah.
Okay, onto page 13 of the original document. As a committee, we did feel it was important to have a basic data ad hoc committee. We felt that was important so that we were all on the same page with basic data about what has happened, that we can reference, in future discussions. It does seem like there is some consistency among some folks, but not everyone is totally on the same page, and so we did feel it was important to collect that basic data. And we also felt like we could have residents who have really dug into this topic help the committee with the collection of the data and not rely on ESA, specifically because we are concerned about the budget. And we do know the residents have spent a lot of time on this. Now, that's not to say that ESA can't review it, and if they have any questions or anything, that's fine. But we thought we could leverage residents to help us collect the basic data.
Steve, would you respond to that, please?
Yes, and my question about this is it's not a committee that we've typically seen associated with roundtables before, that it's somewhat nebulous about what this committee is going to do and how it's going to do it, whereas in most cases, like the technical working group, it would go out and get the data that it needs to do its work, so it would be very focused towards that issue. To me, it's very open-ended in terms of what this committee would do. And again, it would, even though we ESA, may not be involved in collecting data if we're reviewing it or we receive pages of information to take a look at that ultimately has budget information. So I think I would just need to, me personally, would need to know what is this committee going to be doing, what's it collecting, how's it working, so that the roundtable itself has a little bit of comfort level about what this ad hoc committee is doing. And of course, ad hoc committees don't meet under the Brown Act, so they could essentially meet whenever they want and do what they want. Ultimately, they would need to report back to the roundtable, but it's very open-ended to me.
I think as with the technical working group and the legislative working group, we viewed this as something that the roundtable would task specifically, would further refine what we want them to do. And I think what we were talking about was not so much, not gathering new data. So I want to be clear about that. This is not about gathering new data. This is about pulling together kind of a set of basic information that can inform the roundtable and can succeed all of us, so that when somebody new comes in, they can get a basic grounding of what information there is that's relevant, that they have to know, that is useful then, and it may be added to over time as the technical working group. You're right, they may want certain data, but we also saw that this was a mechanism to both get a basic set of information together, supplement that as needed, as the technical working group needed things, and also, frankly, spread the task a little bit so that the technical working group didn't end up doing 95% of the work of the roundtable.
There's, if I may, before we proceed, there's an issue with the formation of our roundtable. And it relies on the fact that where we made exemptions for the 2 county representatives, the bylaws read, and I'm not going to include the county representatives, the city representatives shall be elected officials from the cities.
We're not proposing that.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is we as elected officials are representing the community. And as representing the community, we are here to receive input from the community. But we are not here to form a community that is a conglomeration of elected officials and civilians. So I do not believe that, for several different reasons, that this is something that falls under, is legitimate under our bylaws, and secondly, does have ramifications still with our budget. And it's certainly something that we do have to take under consideration, and we will be discussing the budget and the implications in the February meeting.
If I may also, I hear what you said, Chair, about the bylaws, but I'd like to suggest perhaps consideration of a task force that's under the TWG, which is the Technical Working Group. Gathering data is something that most of the community is already quite versed with, and we wouldn't have to use our consultant or the extra funding towards that. There is very great data that comes from the airports. They have already, their sources of data is already collected, and a lot of the community already has that data. Even San Francisco Roundtable constantly puts that data out. And they themselves, they have it. So they're also looking at FAA, whatever the FOIA requests that they get. So the community itself is already a wealth of information. And we're looking for a baseline right now, and they can even provide that, which from there gets analyzed by our consultants to ensure that the information that we're looking at. But the gathering part of it takes up a lot of time. And I think that since they already have most of it, I would really suggest that we are, that the Technical Working Committee is also assisted by where the wealth of information is coming from.
Steve Preminger has indicated he'd like to speak next.
In my left ear, I hear Glenn saying, not now, not now. But I think importantly, it seems to me the community always has the ability to give input, to give data or whatever. I mean, that public process has to always be there. I guess I'm just struck with, I also want to make sure when appropriate, we're relying on our quote expert, maybe not quote, our expert to gather the information that's going to help guide us so we all are agreeing on the facts presented.
Yeah, I think every,
Excuse me, if you don't mind, I need to recognize you because I need to be sure that he has finished. And I have heard something via Steve from Glenn that perhaps this is something that we really should be discussing as we move around so that we can go back to reviewing everything and not stall this right now. We're all aware that there's worthy discussion to continue. So if we will mark that as something we will return to after we get input and also all the other procedures under the way. So I will definitely be starring for return 3.4.3. With your permission, Anita, was there anything else that, okay.
Okay, so moving on to page 14. The monthly flight reports, 3.5.2. We didn't necessarily have any changes to the wording there, but this was something that we thought the Basic Data Ad Hoc Committee could do. If they don't exist, then I'm not sure which group would do this, but we did think it was important to get monthly flight reports. So maybe we combine this in with the discussion we have about the basic data group.
Okay.
I just don't want to lose it.
Steve, did you have any comment on that particular item?
I think our comments here were only questions. We had no objection to the concept of the monthly flight reports. We did strike, to be consistent with the other section, change that we made, the Basic Data Ad Hoc Committee, but obviously we're going to revisit that.
And then on to page 17, in the priorities section, priority number 2, establish working committees.
Question for the chair. Do you want us to go on to priorities, or do you want to now go back and scrub the work plan before we talk about priorities?
I want to have the entire work plan presented. What are,
Okay.
We'll just continue
Well,
on.
okay.
continue
I
on.
just didn't know whether you wanted priorities broken out as a separate discussion.
That will come at the end of our procedure.
So here it's the same question about having the basic data working group in the priority number 2, because we have it listed there. So just to flag that we would need to update that depending upon what we decide. And that is it.
I think we had one change, pardon me, Madam Chair, of the ad hoc under the appendix, and to say status of actions taken prior to approval of this work plan.
What page are you on?
I'm sorry, I'm on page 18. The very last thing, the appendix, would be status of actions. To explain that, what's in the appendix is a status of actions taken prior to approval of this work plan.
And what did you wish to have done with that?
That's not how it read, I don't think. Currently reads status of actions taken to avoid an unwieldy work plan document. What I want to do was revise those words to say status of actions taken prior to approval of this work plan. Sorry.
Yes. That sounds fine. You deleted too much there, Evan. Oh, I see you added it. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Kathy?
I had was wondering, under priority 3, collaborating with others, and based on the work plan items that are mentioned, I was wondering if 3.6 should not be added to that list, which is the expansion. I lost my page now.
And impact of airport growth and expansion.
Yes, ma'am.
And how would you like to see that noted?
Just added to the work plan items, just in between 3.3, 3.6, 3.8. There's a list of the work plan
Yes.
items.
I have not conferred with Steve, but I think this might be an opportunity for us to look at 3.9 and see if there are other items that we might want to, I'm sorry, I'm not saying 3.9. Got to find my place. Over the month since we've met, items such as Bodega East and West, which was presented to us by Chris Zanardi as an item that had come up for discussion, that would be a possibility for exploration, because it could, if we follow it and try to emphasize that if they went, they tweaked it a bit, we would get better results. I think 70% is now flying one. I'm doing this off the top of my head, where we were hoping for something more with 50%. So I was thinking maybe we could add that. I would also like to think that we could make sure that BRICS is discussed under BSR transition. Bodega nighttime. Carlos, I think this might be the time to have you discuss what we have added to the agenda. And Steve, I'd look to you as to where we might put it.
Yes, I sent a letter to the roundtable. It's at packet page 47. This is the memo that I sent, and it's in response to community members especially from the Santa Cruz Mountain area. In some cases, the FAA has reduced flight altitudes on these routes by moving certain waypoints onshore instead of giving planes more ascent time over the ocean before crossing over the land. And so we've received numerous noise complaints from county residents about these routes, and I listed them under bullet points 1, 2, and 3. And these are the additions that we're requesting be added to the work plan.
Madam Chair, those are the ones I noted earlier that we would potentially list as 1.3.6.7 and 0.8, unless Steve thought that the first two ought to be combined.
Okay, Steve, as I said, how is best for us with the others that have been brought up?
Yeah, I agree with that, the addition in that location, if it is agreeable to the rest of the roundtable, and I think we should keep the last two separate.
The last two, I didn't hear you.
First two separate.
Yeah.
Separate?
Yep.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I ask a procedure question?
Yes.
So, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be slightly digressing. So when did these procedures get implemented and changed? And I'm just wondering, are these something that recently happened, and didn't we have a process in place that the FAA was going to notify us before anything was changed? And did that in fact happen? Or I'm just trying to understand where these are coming from. Are these new things, or have they been out there for a while? Okay, if they're not new, then that's fine. I just want to make sure we didn't miss something in the process. Thank you very much.
No. And they were items that were covered in select committee, and so it's not new, as was Bodega. And can we give a number to Bodega with just for now?
And Madam Chair, Bodega was a part of the select committee activity. We could certainly make that as a 1.3.9.
Anything that's a part of a select committee recommendation, if it was, and I'm going to show my ignorance here and say I'm not sure if the item, as you're specifically talking about it, is a part of one of the select committee recommendations, then it belongs earlier in 1.1, if we want to call it out specifically, because otherwise, pardon me, 1.0. 1.0 has to do with everything having to do with the select committee.
That's why I was
Yeah.
trying to be specific as to where we should be putting it.
And that's why I'm
exactly.
asking, because I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you would be, so it
So,
might be that it belongs under 1.1
Well, it's very much like Pirate, which was part of
Right.
the discussion, so.
So it probably should be either 1.1.5, or we should make it 1.1.4 and shift 1.1.4 to 1.1.5.
So
Either way.
basically, so I'm understanding for sure, you want it to come in before we get to what is currently now 1.1.3, which has to do with south flow. Is that correct? That's going to number.
Or 1.1 point, I'm sorry, before 1.2. Right, Anita?
1.2.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
All the 1 point is select committee.
Yeah,
And all of those procedures has been discussed at select committee?
yes.
Though, I
Well,
only know of stick.
Bodega is,
Oh, we're
excuse me,
talking about,
excuse me. You can certainly respond when you get to public comment. I'm going to pull my updated November.
Madam
I
Chair.
can say that, yes,
We're
go ahead
talking about
while I'm looking.
Carlos's item only, right?
No,
We're talking,
Nighttime sticks is definitely in the update that we received in November 2017. It appears on page 12 as a recommendation 7. Nighttime sticks departures use night waypoint procedure up to the night waypoint, which is in the bay, north of the Bay Bridge. Then the aircraft would head west out over the Golden Gate Bridge.
right.
And this is the issue that
This is
Carlos is
stick.
having. This is stick. Down below, item 8 addresses the increase the procedure of candle departures that stay on the procedure longer and do not turn prior to candle waypoint.
Okay.
So that,
Those are both part of the, if what is in Carlos's letter as items 2 and 3 were in fact part of the select committee, then they belong back in 1.1 something,
yes,
right? Not
Yes.
in 1.3.
right.
Madam Chair, you're looking at the select committee report and not San Francisco roundtables, right?
That is the one that the select committee that I'm familiar with. I am looking at the update on Phase 2, the FAA initiative to address noise concerns of Santa Cruz, Santa Clara County, San Mateo, and San Francisco counties. That I'm talking about the FAA update. And those are
Is it-
having to do with
Response from,
response tables to number 1 select committee recommendations.
response from San Francisco roundtable?
Yeah, I don't have any information on San
okay.
Francisco Roundtable.
Okay. I
I'm
just want to
looking
make
at
sure we're
select
all in
committee.
the right place in
Yeah.
this thing. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just trying to make sure that the origin of these issues is covered in the original select committee report.
Yes.
And
Okay.
placed
So
in the
far,
right-
I'm looking for Bodega now to confirm that.
But what about West LaFour? Is West LaFour then something new, Steve? I'm sorry. Because I think what I just heard Mary Lynn talk about was sticks 4 and candle 4, which are 2 and 3 in Carlos's letter, but she did not mention anything, I don't think, about West LaFour, which is number 1 in Carlos's letter.
Right. And I haven't taken a look at that in the context of whether it's a select committee recommendation or not.
Right.
In that section, I do not see Westla. But I would look to you, Steve, given the fact that they are connected in the impact, what we can do as far as that goes is in placing them under the select committee.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's improper in
Well,
placing
I would
them
say for consistency, if it wasn't in the select committee report, it stays back where we talked about earlier. If it was, then it moves up front to the 1.1 section.
there? Okay, we'll do that when we vote or discuss. And Bodega is recommendation number 11 under the same document. Aircraft flying on the Bodega procedure utilize the so-called east leg over the San Francisco Bay as much as possible. The FAA assessed the potential of formalizing this procedure so that it is more likely to be used. Okay, so.
So it goes under the 1.0.
1.1.
1.1.
I'm sorry, 1.1.
Okay. Steve Preminger.
Just wondering, this may be an example where we want to work with our expert to let him deal with all this stuff so our valuable time isn't wasted. Should it go here or exactly here?
It sounds good to me, but we can all agree and see if you get any.
Yeah, I think where we
Response.
would be is that 1.1.4 would be stick 4 from Carlos's letter, 1.1.5 would be candle 4 from Carlos's letter, and 1.1.6 would be bodega, as the chair has been just describing.
Did you just eliminate time flow?
No, time flow
Time-based
got
flow.
moved. It moved back to 2.6.
Okay. Now,
May I ask another question?
yes.
Does Carlos foresee that there might be other procedures? Do we want to leave a
We have a place, we could always add.
add? Okay. So the exec is remaining?
Yes, always.
Okay.
Carlos,
then
would you like
Westlaw
to
4 would
respond
be-
to that question?
These are the only ones I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay.
I have lots of comments on that.
I'm sure you do. But speaking of that, while we are adding things, I remember that the FAA, when they did their presentation on South Flow, they discussed a waypoint called, I think it's Hider rather than Hitter. Hitter? They had the two eyes are not long eyes then. Okay, it's Hitter. Is there any interest on behalf of Sunnyvale to define that?
Yeah, let's go ahead
As
and
an
have it on
item.
the, if it's, as part of what we've been discussing, let's have it on the list so we can go ahead and deal with it.
Okay. And so, Steve, how would you recommend we place that one?
And that's select committee?
It's not
Oh,
select,
no.
it's South Flow.
Yeah, right now we have
Go somewhere in
1.2.2.
section 2.
Right. Is that section 2 or 1.2.2, Glenn?
Well, we have one.
Yeah, 1.2 somewhere.
It's 1.2.2 is on page 4 is where we currently have San Jose SJC South Flow procedures.
Yes, Anita, thank you. It is.
God help me, I finally figured it out.
Good. I'm glad.
So that would come after that, be 1.2.3.
Yeah.
Hitter. I'm going to, okay. Someday, I don't know that we really want to spend our time, but I think there is a book out that how waypoints are named. I think it would be very helpful.
It should be in the basic data group.
Do we want to add it?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Steve, what would you
And Madam Chair, sort of teeing off what Member Preminger said, and I'm putting this out here as a suggestion, perhaps if the roundtable agrees that these items should be added at the end of its deliberations, then we go back, add them in similar format these others were added, and presumptively assume that's the work plan, and unless there are any objections, when you see it again, it would be the work plan at that point.
I'm not seeing any heads nodding no, so
Okay.
we're good. Okay. So, does that complete the review? Are there any further questions from the roundtable members at this point? All right, public, on your marks. I have some speaker slips. We're doing well in, oh,
Don't jinx it.
yes, 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 yes.
We have a number of
Yes.
speaker slips, so I would say maybe
2 minutes?
Yeah.
I tried. 2 minutes. Okay. And,
And there are some of these that are multiple. so
okay.
they can come back.
recognize that some of these cards, individuals want to speak on several different items. I will just be calling you up for item number 3 right now. The first speaker card I have is Jennifer Landesman. 2 minutes.
You're having some technical help is right behind you.
Okay, hi. Happy New Year. Thank you all for serving on this table. Thank you, FAA, for being here and working with communities. Regarding the work plan, I heard a couple of things come up that I think are really important about technical committees. Just a little bit of history in the SFO Roundtable, when they set up the technical committee, it was in order to hear from people who had not had a chance to be able to speak at the big roundtable. It was when Palo Alto was rejected from joining the SFO Roundtable. So they had an informal committee called the Technical Committee so we could all go and work on technical issues. And it ended up serving not just what was initially the arrivals communities, but it ended up serving the departures communities. And so I would say that on this issue of what the technical committee should talk about, I think there's got to be a lot of balance. I agree with Steve that you don't want, the technical committee to all of a sudden start dealing with housing, but I do think that how your work is looked at, whether it's a top-down approach or a bottom-up, is going to be scrutinized, because roundtables have the reputation of not having been able to address citizen concerns. That's how NextGen happened, is because of a failure of having had that balance. So I really strongly recommend that, and especially FAA, I think you'll be interested in that happening, because we don't want this issue where, things are just being forced by one point of view. This is a multi-stakeholder issue. The other thing is, I think there's a misunderstanding.
Can you stop the clock, please? You had a recommendation and I did not hear it, and I think it's important for us to, about the technical, or is that going to come later?
That I think things are going to work out, because if you're going to have the final say of what the technical committee can work on, I just think that as you're making these decisions, that they be balanced. And I don't foresee problems as long as that's taken into account, because that is our way of being able to provide input. And I'll just add, airports are a big part of it. So on anything, whether it's data or anything, airports are also a big part of the picture. It's not just the public, for us to work together. So I just had one more item, which is that I keep hearing what's going to be on the list, what isn't going to be a list. This was NextGen, what was not NextGen? And this is to Mr. Hendricks's question. Everybody needs to know that every single amendment procedure is new. It's all new. Each decision, FAA makes an environmental decision. So just because something started in NextGen or did not start in NextGen, the fact that it's on this IFP gateway means that it's a brand new opportunity to review. So don't discount things. And I'm a little concerned about something that is going to be published on January 30th, 2020. And I keep begging FAA to not publish procedures without having really had them vetted with the community. Thank you.
The next speaker is Cheryl Poland.
Hi there. Thanks to all of you for your service on the table. I'm Cheryl Poland. I'm leader of Quiet Skies NorCal. I'm also representing Quiet Skies Los Altos and Save Our Skies Santa Cruz, because they weren't able to attend. You all have copies of letters that we sent the other day, specifically related to the work plan, and even more specifically related to the language pertaining to the BSR overlay. You also have a copy of the revision that we've requested to section 1.1.3. If you read the letter, you'll understand the background, but essentially our take on the language in 1.1.3 is that it's violating the congressional mandate to not reopen the Select Committee recommendations. Had you read the Select Committee recommendations, you would have seen section 1.2, recommendation 3, where The FAA is to meet with this roundtable 3 months after the BSR overlay has been implemented, and will work with you all to address any unexpected noise issues. The language stating that essentially BSR overlay procedure should be held up until you all have had an opportunity to understand what the FAA are doing with regard to noise. Again, had you read the FAA initiative, you would understand that their plan is to build an OPD procedure over the BSR track, which is the quietest procedure. I would encourage you to read the documentation that the FAA provided for BSR overlay, and I would just like to say that we disagree with having civilians on select committee because they're neither experts nor are they elected officials. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Diane Matlock.
Okay, so it's very disappointing to stand here and have to push back again on an inefficient bureaucratic process. I was shocked to see your work plan include language to possibly alter the BSR overlay. I read the letters from Save Our Skies and Quiet Skies, and I completely agree with what they've written to you. We've waited for years for real action, but instead of supporting the Select Committee recommendations, some of you seem intent on throwing up roadblocks. You aren't fooling anyone. This isn't rocket science. The change to Surfer from the Big Sur flight path should have never happened. The Big Sur flight path worked for years with no complaints. The Select Committee recommendation is simply to fix what got broken by reverting back to the original flight path. The democratic process that led to the Select Committee report was held as a new way forward for communities, elected officials, and the FAA to find solutions together. Why you feel the need to possibly reopen or alter recommendations is truly baffling. The experts, community, and elected officials have already weighed in based on massive amounts of real data and input, very technical, lots of community input, etc. I'm not sure if it is arrogance or ignorance that is driving the behavior of some of you to think you might know better. Either do your job and support the Big Sur overlay or get out of the way. Enough is enough. We've waited way too long to get some real results and actions. Thank you.
Alistair Fife.
Hi, thanks all for being here. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. The FAA has repeatedly made it clear that it relies on roundtables such as this to gauge community support for proposed changes. This requires the roundtables to define some way of assessing community consensus. And Chair Bernald mentioned that we use the word consensus in her opening remarks, yet the word consensus does not appear anywhere in the strategic plan, nor to my best of my knowledge does it appear anywhere in the work plan. Community consensus should be something live. The FAA releases new information, and based on that information, people's opinions change or they understand things better. The Select Committee defined community consensus as a 2/3 supermajority of the communities early on in its meetings. The City of Los Altos Hills has made it abundantly clear that the vote cast in November 2016 was cast based on a miscommunication from the FAA. And 3 mayors in succession since that time have written to make that point clear. Yet, to the best of my knowledge, this basically remains buried. The 2/3 supermajority required for the surface to BSR transition does not exist and has not existed since at least for a couple of years now. This should be clearly communicated to the FAA. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefania Pietrasek. I hope I didn't mutilate it too badly.
No. First of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you, FAA, for being here. As I'm sitting through, learning more and more, it's very clear this committee has no lack of work and no lack of good it can do for the community, which is why I'm sad I need to be here to review yet again that in your own bylaws it is stated the Select Committee recommendations are not to be relitigated, not to be changed, not to be reopened for public discussion. They're supposed to move forward. The FAA agreed to be here with us under the condition that you honor your bylaws. If this committee continues to support a vocal minority in its attempt to bypass that block, to say, nah, we're just not going to honor that, we're going to continue pushing to reopen particular items, you are going to delegitimize yourself. The FAA is here with good intent, under the understanding we are moving forward with what was agreed upon. Never are you going to get 100% on anything. You had a supermajority. And since there seemed to be ongoing confusion, the congressional reps, Anna Eshu's office and Jim Panetta's office, issued a clear letter that, in layman's terms, said, no touchy-touchy. Keep your hands off the Select Committee report. Yet here we are with 1.1.3 trying to breach that again. I fully endorse the letters both from Quiet Skies and from Save Our Skies Santa Cruz. Remove the attempt to yet again breach that wall. It is not within your authority to go back and change the Select Committee's recommendations. Thank you. Please don't make these guys go home. Thank you.
Thank you. Marty Ainsworth.
Thank you again for being here, and I don't want to be redundant, so I just want to say I support everything that Cheryl and Diane and Stefania said. We've been living under this horror for 5 years, and when I sit here and see all this minutia, and I wake up every midnight at 12:30, and there's not one day that I have 5 minutes of quiet skies outside my house, it makes me nuts. So please, let's get on with it, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Holbrook.
Thank you. The work plan has come a long way, and I'd like to thank the people who contributed to it, and also everyone that's contributed their time to the roundtable, including the chair. I have a few comments regarding specifics in the work plan. Item 1.3.3, regarding the SUNY procedure, I think it should acknowledge that SUNY might, maybe, impact San Jose arrivals as well. It's possible that SUNY is clearing a path for nighttime arrivals at SJC. Item 3.1 states, it is critical for airport staffs and staffs of congressional representatives to attend the roundtable. While I'd say it's highly desirable, critical is a pretty high bar, and almost suggests that the roundtable should cease to exist if they don't attend, and I don't think we would want that. Regarding priorities and the budget, it's true, the budget's a big issue, and the time of the chair and ESA needs to be carefully managed. But a lot of progress can be made by roundtable members volunteering their time. I'd suggest that no matter how the overall priorities line up, roundtable members from Palo Alto and Los Altos should be encouraged to contribute their time to pursue Pirate if they want to, and along with Mountain View and Sunnyvale, South Flow if they want to, and the Santa Cruz County members can pursue Westla, Stick, and Candle if they want to, so long as these actions are consistent with the work plan and don't consume too much of ESA time and budget. Sure, let's identify 2 or 3 top priorities like the BSR overlay, but let's not inadvertently discourage members from contributing their time to causes they care about because we're overly prescriptive about priorities. Thank you.
And Rob, when you are talking about members, you're talking about community members, not roundtable members?
No, I'm talking about roundtable members.
You are specifically
saying? I think you guys are the engines of progress, and the more time you guys can contribute, the more we're going to get done. So I don't want to discourage any of you from chipping in on Stick and Westla just because it got rated 12 in an overall priority ranking.
Thank you for the clarification. Jane Manning.
Hi. I also want to thank the Roundtable for embarking on yet another year of this work. And I came to support Mr. Palacios' information that he submitted regarding the waypoints offshore. I'm not sure that it belongs under section 1.1 because from my non-expert reading of the select committee data that's included, the responses in the agenda packet that the chair referenced, they are, I believe, talking about nighttime operations. And in my experience, STIC, this departure procedure from SFO, and the section that it's using that was referenced in Mr. Palacios' letter is talking about that all the planes would remain offshore that are using, and they would stay offshore for the remainder of their flight. And I think that the problem is that these three procedures, the Oakland one and the San Francisco ones, are operating all day long. And do have a really high noise impact in the higher altitudes of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so I was just wondering whether the Select Committee report responses from the FAA actually were talking at all about daytime operations as well. So that's basically my input about item 3.
Janie, I appreciate you calling me out on that because I know there have been nighttime issues, but for us to know that it's not just nighttime, as you're stating,
and I've seen
important.
that the San Francisco Roundtable, I think, is taking up some stuff about STIC for nighttime, but I'm not completely clear on it. Just that those are procedures that affect us all day long.
Thank you. I know our facilitator has heard you, and we'll get back to discussing that when the time comes. Next card is James Donofrio.
Hello. On the work plan, well, first off, I support the SOS and the Quiet Skies letter 100%. And on the work plan, I'd like to see 1.1 removed, 1.1.1 removed, 1.1.3 removed, other than to monitor the Big Sur overlay. No need to provide input or evaluate noise models prior to implementation. The strategic plan says your strategic plan says the select committee recommendations will not be reopened by the roundtable. The select committee specified that the roundtable would only get involved with BSR after implementation. And before implementation, the roundtable is only supposed to be involved with BSR as a conduit for public input, and between the public and the FAA, that is. And Lisa Matchik assured the public that the 1.1 BSR overlay interface would be removed from the work plan, but it is not. So instead, it got worse. So my trust in the ad hoc work group has been reduced to near zero. If the ad hoc work group can't get with the program set up by our congressional reps and the select committee, then they should resign. I urge other roundtable members to speak up and get the ad hoc work group under control or risk losing public trust and FAA participation. Otherwise, the roundtable itself becomes irrelevant, especially considering San Jose City or San Jose Airport isn't involved. Also, I oppose residents being used as experts. They are not. And the only experts ad hoc members seem to have in mind are Mid-Penn residents. This biases any info and would not be fair to the vast majority of residents. Lastly, I thank Chair Mary Lynn Bernal, who has been doing a great job trying to keep this process moving forward. Wow, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Marie-Jo Fremont.
Happy New Year. I haven't seen the letter that Cheryl Poland mentioned. It was not in the packet, so I'm not sure what we're talking about, but let's talk about the Big Sur overlay. So the select committee recommended and voted to move Surfer to the Big Sur ground track. They did not vote to move Surfer 3 to the Big Sur ground track. So what's the difference? Not just a little digit. Surfer went from the Monterey Bay to the Menlo Waypoint. Surfer 3 goes from the Monterey Bay, same spot, to now it ends at over Los Altos at 80, which had been moved in the process. Surfer 3 was implemented 2 years after the select committee, unilaterally by the FAA. So right now, with their current BSR overlay proposal, the FAA is moving Surfer 3 to the Big Sur ground track. They're not moving Surfer to the Big Sur ground track. That's a big difference. So with their current proposal, the FAA is violating the mandate not to reopen the Select Committee recommendation, which was to move Surfer to the Big Sur ground track. The Select Committee did not vote, did not recommend and did not vote on Surfer 3 moving to the Big Sur ground track. So if the FAA cannot do it, then they need to say that this recommendation 1.2R1 is infeasible. And then in the Select Committee, great Select Committee thinking, there is a recommendation 4, which is discuss a new route that will work for everybody. So that's it. It's not, so Sharon Pollan said the Select Committee recommended to move Surfer to the Big Sur ground track. We all agree, nobody is reopening that. The FAA is reopening the recommendation because they're proposing something that was not recommended or voted on. That's very important. So we're all for respecting the Select Committee recommendations and votes. Thank you.
The next speaker is Tammy Mulcahy.
Hi, well, there's a lot that's been said before me. The Select Committee did vote, make a set of recommendations, and there were so many things that happened when our skies changed that had to do not just with the changing of the ground track, but with the concentration of things, the sheer numbers of the planes, and yes, the procedures. So nothing's going to get fixed simply by moving something. The recommendations were to include all of those situations, all of those parameters in fixing our skies. Yes, data can certainly have research bias, but we've had to have a lot of data from the community simply because the FAA has not shown to be, they're willing to engage, they're willing to talk, but I haven't really seen that they're willing to actually make things right for the community. So we have to have community input that is helping, and it can be directional. We have a person here as our consultant to help us final decisions, but we have to show what the FAA is doing and not doing, and that's what we did through this whole Select Committee process. So we have to have research from the community to educate us and to enlighten us as to what's going on. Yeah, that's really it. The FAA, the Select Committee recommendations were a whole, and they need to fix the skies. I think at some point all communities are going to have to pick our poison, but I agree we needed different waypoints. The one thing they haven't corrected is night flights. It's ridiculous to have these 4:30 flights in the morning, 12:30 flights at night. They're coming in so low. And they're also vectoring now more, I think, over the peninsula. Why are they not being more creative? These are the things that the public sits back and says, they're not really doing anything, they're making it worse. I don't know if San Francisco Airport is a part of the solution, but the other day, bodegas were coming down over the peninsula, making a circle, going back over the same communities before they went up to San Francisco. That's double vectoring.
Thank you. Darlene Yapley.
Thank you again for the ad hoc effort on the work plan and everybody else's effort. I know it's a lot of work. I want to say that my position is not to reopen the Select Committee recommendations, but I will say that the Roundtable is responsible to monitor the recommendations of the Select Committee and how they are implemented and planned. It's an appropriate role for the Roundtable. Yes, we need to monitor, and that means track it, review it, and provide input. I agree 100%. We should not change the recommendation, but we need to say, are they doing the recommendation? That is very different. If we find that the FAA is not implementing the recommendation, we can't do nothing. We have to give input. Otherwise, you can write in the plan, watch, and do nothing. That's not what the goal is. So this should be the case that, again, we monitor, review, and give comments. The recommendation by the Select Committee, thank goodness, said 3 months after implementation, look at the actual. That is looking at the actual. But what they did not say is do not give any input until we implement. That was not said. We can't stand by if we know something is done wrong. And we don't know if something's done wrong. We're waiting for the FAA to come and present. So we need to look at the data and decide if we want to give input and hold them to the recommendation that, again, should not be reopened and should not be changed. That's the job of the roundtable, the successor committee.
Thank you. That's the end of the speaker slips that I've received. Is there anyone else who did not turn in a speaker slip who would like to speak at this point? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the third part of our process, which is member discussion. And I'm going to have member discussion, and then I think after we do that member discussion will give us an opportunity to hear from each individual that wants to speak. And then after that, we will approach the priorities, as you ask, Anita. So normally it seems to be useful to go down the table. If somebody wants to speak out because something has been raised, we'll do this. That's probably the best way for me to note you. But I will start with, okay, whoever is first up then.
And Madam Chair,
Yes.
just to be clear, the member discussion is about item number 3, the work plan. We've not moved on to the member discussion at the later point in the agenda.
Item number, would you say that again, please?
Yes, so
Still on 3.
we are currently, where's my agenda? We are still in item number 3, the work plan ad hoc committee.
Yes.
I am clarifying because we do have an item 5, which is member discussion. We have not left item 3 yet.
Right, yeah, thank you for the clarification, good. Glenn, and then Carlos.
So I'm happy to start. I have about 4 different topics, and do you want to, and they're like, 3.4.1 and 3.4.3. Do you want me to just tell you all my stuff in one thing, go?
Sure.
Okay.
If you will go slowly as to which item, because I noticed today I'm slow in picking up which one is 3.1 point, and then I kind of lose it.
So I think I'm going to go by, maybe numbers changed, so this is what I thought they were.
Go ahead
So
and the title.
3.4.1, this is talking
Again,
about the
please,
technical
which-
committee.
what number?
3.4.1, the
Okay.
technical committee. And, there's some of this discussion about, here, what were we trying to do, and did we want to have, some direction from the main committee and stuff like that? And where I really would like a better understanding of what the technical committee is going to be working on, we are a policy-based thing. And I have said multiple times, I think one of the challenges where we get in a problem when we say, here, let's get into the nitty-gritty technical details of something, I think every time we do that, I'm sorry, the FAA wins. What we should be talking about is what's the policy? What is it, the impact on the ground that we're trying to discuss? The things that the technology of the FAA doesn't really go into. So I'm okay with having a technical committee. I just think we need to be very careful about this need that everybody seems to have to want to drive really deep into the technical details. I'm not sure that's really advantageous to us. And then one of our residents came up and said that in San Francisco, the reason they created a technical committee was that's where residents could go complain at. I don't think that's a good use of a technical committee, of what we need to go ahead and do. People should be able to speak at it if it's there, but I don't think we should just be setting up another committee to let people speak at it as opposed to our committee. So that was my comments about 3.4.1.
And Steve, can you give us an idea of how technical committees have worked in your experience?
Yeah, they usually are there for a specific assignment. Take, for example, a change in a certain procedure. They're then tasked with looking at that procedure, analyzing what the changes were, what the potential noise impacts were, or if it's being proposed, what they might be, and then reporting back to the roundtable.
As a whole.
And again, I think that's one of the issues, is one of the things that the FAA does, they're going to say, well, here, technically, we have some DB level thing, and it's not meeting that threshold, so it's not a problem. We need to be talking about what the policy impact is as it relates to people on the ground, which is not the technical stuff that the FAA looks at. We should, so again, I don't have a problem with the technical committee. I just think we have to be very careful about what it's going off to do, and is the technical analysis they're doing being able to be brought back so it can be used in a policy discussion, as opposed to just let's continue to have a technology or a technical discussion argument with the FAA, which I just think we'll lose every time. But that was that one. So
Okay.
next is 3.4.3, this basic data committee. Somebody please help me understand the definition of the word basic. There are 9 of us around here, and if you asked us, you'll get 10 different definitions. Again, and I heard differing comments about would they just be gathering data that already exists, or would they be creating new data? And the really key part that I didn't hear discussed is how it would be formatted and presented and what the historical record is for how, how it's used. Just creating data, if you actually don't have a plan of how it's organized and structured and used, I'm not sure what the value is of what's being done there. And this ties to the next one of 3.5.2, the monthly flight reports. Again, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I'd like to have an understanding of what flight reports and what it's going to focus on. Just a flight report that said, here, the number of flights in and out of San Jose, not particularly useful. One, if you talked and said, here, we wanted to have a report that said, here, what are the specific times that we go ahead and we use South Flow? Maybe interesting. What is the number of flights that happen after a particular hour? So that we're actually using the reports to get to particular questions we might have, as opposed to just basic reports. I don't want to say I want to do this, but in a previous job in my life, you couldn't build a report in my company without coming and telling me what you wanted to do with it. And that's how we eliminated like 400 reports in the company, because people were just generating reports because they liked them and did their little thing, but it didn't meet to what the overall objectives are. So if we're going to have reports, let's make sure they tie to some kind of business, or not business, but policy discussion or policy question we're trying to answer, as opposed to just saying we have a lot of reports, because we spend a lot of time generating information that doesn't get to where you want to go. 3.6, the topic was here, we want to have an item where we talk about airport growth. I don't really think that's our role. If we wanted to kind of restructure that to say, what do we want to focus on, and maybe this goes back to the reports, of how frequently or what is the volume growth of a particular procedure. That, it seems more interesting. Airport expansion at San Jose, for example, I'm going to the Airport Land Use Committee tonight, and from what is their current plan to their future 10-year growth out, they're only talking about like a 200 air operations growth, even with all the stuff of what they have. So the growth of San Jose Airport is not really the question. It's what's going to happen in terms of the number of air operations that they have. What's the frequency of that they can have? Are they going to be able to put more air flights in the morning or late evening? Those kind of things seem to be more specific that we should try and focus on, rather than just saying, here, we want to do airport growth. And then the last one, one of our residents in their comments talked about here, our members of our board, we should be encouraged to go off and try and focus on other things, and that we should take advantage of the interest of what we want to have. And I don't disagree with that, except for we have a challenge, and it really comes from the FAA. Because I've had lots of interest in stuff, and I've tried to go ahead and reach out to the FAA, national level, to go ahead and talk to them about things that are going on here in the airspace, and they won't talk to me unless it actually comes through this committee. They're more than willing to talk to me about anything that I want, except for what is a topic of this committee. So to just say we could go ahead and enable us as a group to go off and go work on things, I'm not sure that's really an appropriate perspective. I would love it to be so, but we would have to get specifically the FAA national level people to agree that that's the way we're going to do that. So I think we need to be more focused. Let's understand what it is that we're trying to do, and let's not have lots of what I would say random stuff. Let's be very specific about what we're trying to accomplish through this this committee and its subcommittees, so we can actually get direct information back to the FAA of what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Glenn. You've brought up a couple of items that I'd like to have some input from Steve, if I may, please. I'll go with the Basic Data Committee. you have indicated that that the technical working group, as they were assigned, would no doubt be gathering their own data. Is that how you're viewing that? And anything else you want to say about the request for the third? It's an ad hoc committee, but how that could work even outside of what Steve Preminger has said with the budgetary consequences?
Yeah, I mean, most committees in a technical working group committee would get an assignment, decide what data it needs, go out, get that data for that assignment, work the assignment out, and then report back to the roundtable on. It's the typical way that it works.
And in doing so, you would be a source for a lot of that technical data.
Yes.
Yes.
We would be a potential source, correct.
And in being the potential source, you probably would be then gathering flight reports or something like that might be coming from the FAA or the airport?
Potentially, yeah,
how is that
depending
gonna
on the issue, right.
Depending on the issue, okay. Then Glenn has talked about flight reports. To you, what is the definition of flight reports?
I'm not sure what that term.
It's in here, so this is why
I was just going by what, 3.5.2 said, that we wanted to have monthly flight reports. That was kind of the definition. Again, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but we should be very clear on what we want the flight reports to, I don't think we're just saying here what's already generated by somebody else, that we're trying to get a specific answer or a piece of information to address a question we have. Just having, a flight report from all the different airports, I'm not sure that would achieve anything for us. If we had specific questions, like we wanted to find out how much flights were happening at night, that might be a specific thing as opposed to just generic flight reports. That's the distinction I was trying to make. I don't have a problem with it. I think we have to be more specific about what we're asking for and I would encourage us to tie what we ask for to questions or policy things we're trying to look at as opposed to just generic information.
And flight reports can be generated from the airports. They can be generated, speaking in terms of what Glenn is referring to now in those parameters.
Yeah, like a nighttime runway use report, that type of thing, yes.
Okay, and that's something that your firm does?
Yes, we could either do it if the information is publicly available, or we would work with Bert, for example, at SFO to get that data.
Okay.
And may I make one suggestion, Madam Chair?
Please.
Don't want to upset your process, but I would think that it would be more efficient rather than me addressing each of the members' items that we go through, hear everything from them, and then if there are specific questions, we could come back and do that.
Good. I will honor that. I'm not sure that we can, how we're going to be able to address airport growth. And so I'll leave that out there for you to answer later on, because I know we're going to hear it. In the list I've been tracking, Carlos's card went up next.
Thank you. I'd like to address item 1.1.3 in the work plan. This is the effort to monitor the FAA's effort to transition Surfer to Big Sur. And I've received a lot of comments from the community on this, and there's a lot of sensitivity to language here. And I know everybody on this roundtable is committed to implementing the recommendations that came out of the Select Committee, and the congressional representatives have made that clear as well. But some of the wording is causing consternation in the community, and so I've gotten a ton of emails and phone calls and just a lot of fear. And I know that was none of our intent at all. It's just, it shows you the sensitivity of the issue, that people are this, worried about it. And I know that we ourselves are committed to the recommendation being implemented as soon as possible. That is also that we, the Select Committee, we're supportive of it and we want it to be implemented. So I have some amendments that I think address some of the concerns of the community, and they were provided by Quiet Skies and Save Our Skies, and it's at our desk. They actually provided copies, and I don't know if you, I agree with almost everything in the amendment, but there's a few things I wanted to change, and I don't know if you want me to just read through one by one or go through what they handed out. I don't know what's easier.
It's easier to track if you go in
One by one.
Please.
Okay. So if we could go to 1.1.3, this is the page 2 of the operations plan. So the first suggested amendment would be in the very first paragraph. It says the roundtable will track progress, and then we would delete review proposals and provide input. And then it would read on, so it would read, the roundtable will track progress on the FAA's implementation of recommendations in section 1.2 of the final report of the select committee. So we would delete the words review proposals and provide input. And again, that is because they're worried, the community is worried that if we spend time debating with the FAA about these in terms of reviewing their proposals or providing input, that it's going to delay the transition. And the community's been waiting 5 years for this transition or longer, so that's the reason for that. If you go to the first bullet, under desired outcomes, it would, the recommendation would be to delete the first sentence. And would just leave the FAA provides roundtable a substantive update on the progress of the report at least quarterly. On the second bullet, I know the letter that we received recommended deleting that that bullet, but I actually want to keep that. I think that's important that the noise environmental impacts to affected communities and individuals under the Big Sur overlay are minimized. I think that, so I would leave the second bullet as is. So I would read the noise and environmental impacts to affected communities and individuals under the Big Sur overlay are minimized. Under the second bullet, it would delete before the FAA finalizes the procedure for rollout, and while there's still an opportunity to alter it, it would delete that, and it would leave 3 months after the implementation of the BSR overlay, the FAA shall meet with the roundtable regarding noise and environmental impacts under the proposed BSR. Under the, oh, I would delete the proposed, yeah, under the BSR. And then the recommendation would be to delete the next bullet on the technical working group. The following 3 bullets would stay the same. Actually, the fourth bullet, or yeah, after where it says the FAA shall work with the roundtable. I don't know what number that is. Huh. Oh, that's a new one. Okay. So we're suggesting adding a bullet here that says the FAA shall work with the roundtable and the affected communities to make adjustments to the BSR overlay procedure if needed to reduce its noise exposure. And then I think that's, and then it would, the recommendation would be to delete that last bullet.
The one that reads in advance of developing?
Yes. And again, the concern is that the community is worried that anything that would happen in advance of the actual transition, that could delay the transition. So that would be the proposed amendment I would make to 1.1.3, and I think it does most of what the community is asking, while also protects the folks under BSR in terms of our ability to help adjust that if there are noise impacts under BSR.
Is that it, Carlos?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next in line to speak is Kathy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My input regards Section 3.6, which is tracking and commenting on the impacts of airport growth and expansion. And I know Glenn has already touched upon the issue in another section, but specific to this particular section, I'd like to, I have some concerns, and I mean, I'm glad that it's part of the work plan. It's really important because of the fact of, you know, how San Jose is growing right now. And it's been written about its expansion. And I know several folks responded to the EIR that was, or the amendment to the airport growth plan, and the City of Santa Clara also submitted a response to the draft EIR. And I don't know if we've received but we haven't. The city hasn't received a response back. I believe it was due January 13th, and I know one of the community groups did submit their response to me, which I did forward to our city manager to review as part of our submittal to the draft EIR. Then San Jose City Council did have a meeting last Tuesday where they have got, they're moving forward with airport expansion, but it's not final. They will have a final meeting on the issue in March. And I mean, the desired outcomes as part of this particular section are wonderful because they address, you know, what we should be doing as a roundtable in terms of notifying members in advance of the public comment, which we did, and several, I don't know if any other cities responded, but the City of Santa Clara definitely did. You know, we're supposed to be advocating for its member communities through submitting comment letters, which I encouraged my community to do. I did in response to the EIR. I submitted my own letter as a council member and as a resident of the community, but also that the roundtable requests that airports put in place mechanisms to contain negative impacts on our community members. And so as a result of these desired outcomes, I have to ask, you know, what action does this committee want to take? Because, you know, the big elephant in the room is the fact that San Jose is not at this table, and so we cannot address them directly. And San Jose is going to be making a final decision. How is that going to impact my community and other communities? And so, and what have they done? I mean, as far as I know, you know, listening to my residents and the ones that are contacting me, nothing has been done. They're just moving ahead without outreach to the community. District Director Tom Pike from Congressman Khanna's office and myself and some residents went out one morning into just here, starting at 6:30 in the morning, how the planes were taking off every 60 seconds. And so basically, you know, Glenn asked the question, you know, where can they add these planes? I don't know, Glenn, because right now they're taking off every 60 seconds. And so how many more? Where are they going to stick them in? British Airways is planning, you know, flights this summer, those big flights, those big planes, and there is a lot of concern in the community. We have measured the decibels, you know, with the residents. We see how high they are. A new monitoring system was implemented right out there to monitor the noise, and so. I mean, with the time is of the essence, I feel right now, and for this committee to take some action, as well as the City of Santa Clara and even my constituents, to address this concern.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lydia, are you still up?
I was just going to respond to some of the questions. I'll wait on that. I wasn't going to provide more input on this, but responding to some of the questions.
Okay. All right. I think you should do it now. Lisa's going to speak after you, and then I don't have any other, I see Steve Preminger after that.
So regarding the San Francisco Technical Committee, I can't say that there isn't, I've attended many of them, and I can't say that all of them doesn't have people, residents who come in to provide their concerns, but the residents, there are a lot of residents who do come in and help the committee's members to come up with solutions and to come up with recommendations to take back to the full roundtable. So I'd have to say that they are very helpful when it comes to providing recommendations and just coming to a solution, brainstorming together. And then with regards to the Basic Data Ad Hoc Committee, I think I agree, with Glenn that it needs to be very prescriptive and we need to give good directions. However, a lot of the data that is collected is already available, like a chair had said, that it's from the San Francisco Roundtable or it's already available in the FAA websites. And a lot of times when the residents provides it, it comes with citations. So not only will our consultant be reviewing or even providing these information, but these information that comes from residents do come with citations a lot of times. The monthly flight reports, they're very useful because a lot of this, not only for the data collection committee, but also with the flight reports, they can provide baselines. One example would be San Francisco showing percentage of Bodega East and West splits. I mean, that is just one example of where we can be tracking how many flights are going the East Bodega and how many are going west. And those information are imperative to provide to a technical working group and at the end to the entire roundtable. Again, just to make sure we are providing baselines. And I think in another way we can also have the committee provide proposed reports for approval by the roundtable. So it's not just coming from the technical working group. In response to Carlos, and thank you so much for your amendments, I guess my concern is, this letter came in today, and I'm reading here, and there's about global concerns. And I appreciate that we do have global concerns, and it is global. So global includes the entire region, Metroplex. It's not just one area. Noise and its impacts, environmental, all of it, it does not stay within boundary lines. So I think that I appreciate the letter. I appreciate the concerns. However, with the 3-month period of implementation, if the FAA does not implement it the way that the Select Committee had recommended, is this roundtable supposed to put a duct tape around its lips and not say one word or provide feedback or input about it for 3 months? I guess, that's my concern, is we are tied at not saying anything. And this procedure or this move.
Within 3 months.
Within.
Read it.
3 months after is what your letter wrote. Your letter says it. But I'm not going to go into an argument here because it's my time to speak. And like I said, it's a global concern. But I want to know that as a roundtable representing globally, are we not supposed to say anything if this procedure is not implemented the way that the SC committee had said? So that's my concern. And I don't think this, providing input is very relevant and is very important for all of the communities.
Okay, is that it? Lydia, did you have anything more?
Not right now. Thank you.
Okay. Next, Steve.
I was just looking at 3.6 and hearing Glenn's comments about is local airport expansion really within the purview of this committee, which is here to deal with airplane noise. And I'm just wondering if Steve has a thought about that. You know, this committee is here for a blip in time. Airport expansion is probably, unfortunately or whatever, forever. So I see city councils and, you know, representatives of all the city councils here. I assume they are the correct body to be weighing in Santa Clara and all the other cities about that and the impact it has on their residents. So kind of throwing that at you, Steve.
Yeah, I think of airport expansion, and I think of it in the context of noise. That's an appropriate area for the roundtable to weigh in on. My concern always goes to the issue of trying to constrain airport growth. There are a number of regulations in place, not the least of which is the 1990 Aircraft Noise and Capacity Act. I had mentioned that during the Noise 101 that I did. It severely limits airport proprietors' rights to stop aircraft from coming in or prevent access to the airport. They accept funds to improve the airport. So the roundtable would need to be very nuanced in terms of its commenting on those types of issues. But certainly in the area of noise and we also extend into emissions, the roundtable could express concerns about noise and emissions related to airport expansion. But I would caution the roundtable in terms of trying to guide or advise an airport proprietor or the city, in this case for San Jose, the City of San Jose, to stop airport growth or stop airport expansion.
Steve, can you elaborate in 20 words or less what that regulation does say?
Yeah, so it's also known as ANCA, the Aircraft Noise Capacity Act. This was passed in 1990 in exchange for phasing out Stage 2 aircraft at the time. It severely limited airport proprietors' ability to restrict access to their airports of any kind in terms of aircraft operations. And with the idea of there would be an all Stage 3 fleet. We've since become a Stage 4 fleet, a Stage 5 fleet. As new aircraft come online, that aircraft would be getting quieter in that there would be an exchange for that, and therefore there would not need to be airport proprietors limiting access to their airports. For example, one might argue, well, Stage 3 are the noisiest class of aircraft, let's make them go away. And there's just not a vehicle to allow that to happen in a very non-cost-effective way for airport proprietors. So that would be my only caution. I mean, the roundtable can say and do whatever it wants from a policy standpoint, but that would be something that any of the airports that we work with could not act on. They can't restrict the operations of the airport.
And part of that was because there's demand from the public, or is that a different act? That says as long as the public is demanding flights, the airports can continue to grow?
Well, they're without getting into too many of the details, when airports receive federal funds, they sign what are called grant assurances, and those grant assurances indicate that they will allow or keep the airport open to access for aircraft operations 24/7 and not discriminate. It also has interstate and international commerce clauses in it as well.
But getting back to noise and environmental issues, they have to do a NEPA.
Yeah.
And is there a place for our roundtable to participate in that NEPA?
Yeah, so any of these projects, if it's a federally approved project, it would be subject to the National Environmental Policy Act. If it's a discretionary action that, say, in this case, the City of San Jose takes, it's subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. And as Kathy mentioned, there are environmental documents that are prepared, and then there's a public comment period, and this body could in fact review those documents and submit public comments on it in the context of noise and emissions, which is its role.
So then we hit a deadline in which we would have to act. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
And
there are
so-
always deadlines associated with those
Of course.
documents.
I didn't mean to be stupid with
Yeah.
that, but I'm
Right.
leading to something in terms of how we prioritize our work plan.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I didn't hear from everyone. Oh, you put it down. As next, okay. Yes, okay, thank you, Lisa.
So, Carlos, I appreciate your initial comments about the position of this roundtable when it comes to the select committee, because I completely agree. I'm also frustrated that we are talking about this again, as was mentioned in the communication we got. I feel like we've talked about this a number of times, and I know I've stated it is not my intention, and I don't believe it's any of our intention to reopen the recommendations from the select committee. And in fact, last time we added wording to that effect into the strategic plan, and we took the wording exactly from the letter we received from our congressional representatives. I don't know how much stronger we can make it, but I've thought of some more ideas. It is in the strategic plan, and I would say we could also add it to the work plan, and we could add it in the section where we talk about, let's see, look at these words read these words very carefully, because yes, words are subject to interpretation. But we could add on page, sorry? Well, you know, these microphones are so awkward. I want two hands to move my paper,
Just pull it down.
but it doesn't go any further. I want to
okay.
use two hands to look through a paper.
Carlos will help you.
So we could add it in the section on 1.0, the exact same wording from the strategic plan about it's not our intention to reopen anything from the select committee. And I do agree that if the implementation by the FAA is different from what the select committee said to do, then we would want to comment. But it's only in those instances where it's different from what the select committee recommended. So if we wanted to make that,
I'm sorry.
if we wanted to add wording to that effect, because, I mean, sometimes the FAA might discover something as they go to implement what the select committee recommended that maybe we should comment on. But it's not to change the recommendation. So, and I don't believe I said remove, I think I said move the last time we talked about this, and we did move the section on procedures from that the select committee recommended from the procedures section to the select committee section, specifically because we said we weren't going to reopen it. So I apologize if people heard something different than what I said, but I'm very willing to strengthen the wording in that section if we want to do that.
Steve, is this the appropriate time where we might actually compare and contrast what is in the document as it is now and what I believe is because not everyone has a copy of this. I'm looking to you for the best way to handle this, because this seems to be the most contentious issue at this point.
And Madam Chair, what do you want to compare and contrast?
I am looking at, there's an awful lot here to figure out, what has been submitted to us and what the speakers from from that end of the room spoke to and what they would like to see. Some saying requesting the second, third, and fourth bullet points under 1.1 be removed, and 1.1.3 be shortened to read, simply read, the roundtable will track the progress. And then under desired outcomes, request you remove and provides input on the FAA's development and implementation of the BSR overlay procedure and practices associated with its use. As I'm reading these,
And this is on the letter that has the Save Our Skies.
as I'm reading this, I am wondering if, well, there's two, but that one summarized what was here on this one that you're holding up, Anita. So, although they may differ a little bit. I would like, with the committee's approval, that I have some input from Favi as a representative of the FAA, and how that process will play out, specifically with Big Sur in this situation, in terms of where we as a body can weigh in your procedure, where there are opportunities to weigh in, and who determines that the procedure is not going the way that someone believed it was going to go. So, do you have the copies here, and do you have the copies of this? This may sound a little peculiar, but I want to make sure that what we advance is something that is doable. And so I'd like to have your input on what has occurred today and the reactions to those who wrote the work plan.
What I can say, Mary Lynn, from what I've heard, I think that those are all fair changes and requests as far as the input you're getting on the work plan. I believe we'll be able to give you more definitive information at the next meeting, and that's really all I can say right now.
Okay, I know I put you on the spot because we didn't give you 30 days notice. Is there an issue that you, I don't mean to be putting this in a negative light, but I'm trying to get as much information as I can out of here. Going through the desired results that come under 1.1.1, are there items there that we would not be able to impact as a roundtable? So the roundtable and informed community will understand the status of the recommendations. We hope the roundtable will be able to understand them. I don't see any problem with that. Critical items are immediately flagged, so the roundtable can follow up in a timely fashion to understand the item from the FAA and effectively provide input on changes or potential changes to the FAA. I think it's the provide input on changes or potential changes to be implemented. I want to know if that's doable. If it's realistic, I should say, given you being the FAA.
And are you asking as far as the roundtable, is it possible?
Please. If we are going to be setting up a work program, I am not looking to her to approve it. I am looking to make sure that what we are setting up is realistic, and where in the FAA's process we are going to be able to have an impact. And Steve, I'm going to look to you also.
I think it's a fair question for Polly.
So specifically, you want to know if the language that is being proposed or that, what bullet are you referring to? Because in general, I think that it is fair and doable. So maybe if you can restate the question that you're looking for an answer to, if that's okay.
Steve, can you define it compared to what has been proposed and what is in here and what might help Favi understand what we're trying to get at?
Madam Chair, I'm confused. I don't know.
I think we all are. That's why I'm looking to Steve right now.
But I'm not sure if you're asking about 1.1.1 or 1.1.3. That's why I'm confused. Because what you were reading just now is 1.1.1, but what Carlos and the group has been talking about is 1.1.3.
Thank you. appreciate your straightening that out.
Well,
So 1.1, for me, yeah, for the numbers, I warned you guys. The desired outcomes are the FAA provides the roundtable a substantive update on the progress of the program at least quarterly. That's something that has been given to us there. Is that a realistic
so we're
ask?
talking specifically about the BSR surfer change.
Under 1.1.3, yes. We can expect you to give us a substantive update on the progress of the program BSR, at least quarterly. That's pretty much what your updates are, except they have kind of fallen off and we didn't get one when we expected it, but we're expecting one in February. Correct. Okay.
You received one in November, correct?
That's our last one, yes.
Yes.
No, we received one in July.
Yeah, July
July.
was the last one.
Yeah, so we did not get one in November. That's why I'm asking quarterly.
I apologize, I will follow up.
Okay.
But I know we're definitely planning on having one for the next meeting.
In February.
For the next meeting.
And 3 months after the implementation of the BSR overlay, the FAA shall meet with the roundtable regarding potential noise and environmental impacts to communities under BSR. And it includes understanding the impacts under the path of the procedure and its approaches to the airport, as well as areas to be affected by vectoring, nighttime impacts, areas along the procedure and vectoring paths where noise increases caused by deployment of surfaces or thrust are expected, and the FAA shall work with the roundtable and affected communities to make adjustments to the BSR overlay procedure, if needed, to reduce the noise exposure.
Sounds right? Yep.
Okay, now,
Madam Chair?
what we're going back to is what you've proposed? Is that where you were going, Anita?
Yes, because I think I'm going to try and simplify what I think the delta is here.
Good.
If I can. I think the delta is if what's being developed, and I'm going to use the term developed because we're not yet at a proposed procedure, I believe, although I could be wrong. If what's being developed does not 100% match the recommendation of the select committee, I think the question is, what is the proper role of the roundtable to meet the community's global interests? And how do we do that? And I think that depends on, without, and I think that this is an important consideration, without delaying the implementation, because that is a very strong message from our community that we've been waiting long enough for this to get fixed. So the question is, without delaying implementation, does this roundtable have a role if there's a change between what was believed to be the case with the select committee recommendation and what is going to be proposed?
Would you ask that particular question again, that last part?
Sure.
What you just said.
Sure. What is the proper role of this roundtable during the development process of the procedure, if any, if the procedure would not match the recommendation in the select committee report?
Okay, thank you.
And how would we interact with the FAA without delaying the publishing of the procedure?
Okay. Favi, as these procedures go through the procedure of implementing them, there occur changes that you become aware of where not necessarily what is recommended is actually going to be the outcome. Is that correct? So, excuse me, when the select committee says we want the plane to go from A to B to C, but somewhere along the way in implementing that new, the transition as we're talking about, the FAA discovers that from A to B it has to be tweaked in some way because of something or other that could change the outcome, right? Uh, How do we, how do you as an FAA, I mean, these changes have to be made occasionally. And when they are made, what are the reasons behind them being made? Is safety?
Oh, absolutely, but I think that if I may, I think I understood the question be, is there an opportunity for you to provide input if you have asked us to develop a procedure that we can't match 100%, right? So what I can tell you is that we will go over whatever it is that we are going to implement or that we've looked at, whatever procedure, proposal, or whatever, you know, whatever we can do, it will be shared with you, the roundtable.
And
most likely the, you know, chairperson and however that's vetted, that's up to you.
where in the process does that sharing occur?
Well, I think once we have a procedure and we're ready to share it. In this case, we're just not ready, and you will have an opportunity to see, you know, what it looks like.
So does that look like what we have been talking about within the 3 months of it being developed? Or is there something sooner?
I'm hoping that it will be sooner.
I'm talking about our ability, okay.
Madam Chair, I think the 3 months as written in the Select Committee report applies to 3 months after the procedure is actually published
Yes.
and operating.
And that's what I'm trying to say, sooner, as a roundtable.
Prior to being publishing. I think that the question is, do we have a point before publishing or not? That do we have a role before publishing or not? That's the core question, if it's different.
And so if it is different, then where do we get to chime in as you're doing the updates?
Yes. I mean, we wouldn't, yes, so I'm saying yes, you will have an opportunity to look at the procedure.
Okay,
For publishing.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. Steve?
So Madam Chair, I think for me, you know, we're trying to craft this document from the roundtable members' perspective. Did the changes that Carlos make solve the problem? Because he was sort of looking at that. Are there additional changes that the roundtable members want to make based on what they've seen, or are they good to go? Because ultimately, it's this body's work plan that you're going to work through that you will live with once this is done. And I should mention, too, that work programs and plans can be amended on a fairly regular basis. Most roundtables I've worked with try to do it on an annual basis, but there are items that come up, things need to get inserted, and it can happen, you know, potentially in a meeting basis. So you don't necessarily want to do that, though.
Steve and then Glenn.
Well, I was going to say, to move the discussion, I would move that we support Carlos's recommendations.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. I'm going to ask for a vote right now, unless there was any discussion prior to the vote. Glenn, did that have anything, what did you wish to speak to, had anything to do with it?
So if I could just speak to this very quickly, because I was actually going to request Carlos to actually make the motion to do his changes. I would, maybe a friendly amendment to include what Lisa brought up of taking the section that's in the strategic plan and copying here that addresses the question here. We're not trying to change the select committee. And I wanted to be able to try and address this questions coming up of, well, what happens if they don't implement what the select committee said? And I would encourage us to, it's not for us to address that it's really, I think it's incumbent upon the FAA. If you're not going to do what the select committee said, before you implement that, you should send a letter to the Congress members involved, and they could either respond back, they could ask us to try and step in, and, you know, we're trying to say here, do we have an involvement? They've been very clear our involvement was within 3 months of it being implemented. If if the FAA implements something that isn't what the select committee did, we can say that. And I would say our direction would be to go back to the Congress members involved, not necessarily the FAA, because it's very unclear to me what our authority is in that role. That's what I'm saying. I like what Carlos said, add Lisa's thing, and this question of if the FAA does something that is not what the select committee asked for, they should be going asking for forgiveness from the Congress people. And then the Congress people, they can decide what to do. They can yell at you directly. They can ask us to yell at you on their behalf or whatever it is that they might want to do. But that seems to me the way to try and address that. And, you know, if you want to give us when you write the letter to the FAA that says, here, you're not doing what they said, you might want to copy us, and we can send a letter to the congressman or make sure they're being highlighted about. But that's my thing. It's what Carlos asked for, what Lisa suggested, and then this whole question we're dealing with needs to be dealt with separately. It's not actually part of our work plan because the select committee was very clear on that they didn't want us to be involved in that. Although if once they implement something that's incorrect, we can speak up then.
So Glenn has asked for a friendly amendment. Steve, you were the maker of the motion. Do you agree? Carlos, do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. I see that Lydia would like to talk on that.
I have a comment. So I can support this friendly amendment, but I would also like to make an amendment. The gentleman had said that it was 3 months, within 3 months of the implementation of BSR. So I'd like to change the word after to within 3 months, within 3 months of the implementation of the BSR overlay, the FAA should meet with the roundtable regarding noise and environmental impacts. At the same time, I would like to also add that we do have input or feedback. You know, taking away our voices is, you know, FAA has said when we went and visited them in Washington, D.C., that when Palo Alto went out to visit them, they said, work through your roundtables in order to get us in order to let us know what the issues are or what you like and dislike, whatever. Work through your roundtables. And we have not, in any of this documentation, said that we are revisiting, reopening, changing anything of the Select Committee's recommendations. We are just monitoring, tracking, and providing feedback on their implementation of procedures. So I do appreciate Glenn's friendly amendment, and looking at this, I would like to change it to within 3 months and also include back in here, provide input.
Okay, Steve Preminger, will you agree to that amendment?
So I guess I'd like to see if Steve has any concerns about that.
Okay, Steve Alverson, no concerns. Okay, provide within 3 months and provide input. Carlos, it's actually your baby.
Yes.
You're okay with this?
I have one more
Okay.
question. Can we specify that they'll provide a substantive update in February
We are
quarterly thereafter or something?
we are going to actually, we have that scheduled for next month. So I don't know
My
that I
concern
want
is
it.
if it slips. I don't want it to slip.
We have, I'll let you comment.
Anita, are you suggesting we put that in the work plan?
I don't know. I am acutely aware of the time frame issue here. And I think we all are. And I want to reassure all the people who are here, we understand the pain and the need to get this done. And nobody here, so I'm just going to echo as an ad hoc member who hasn't spoken to this, nothing in what we were doing was to delay or change. That was absolutely not what we wanted to do. Our concern is to get relief as soon as possible, consistent with the recommendation of the Select Committee. So, and I don't know, maybe we don't have to press, but somehow we have to make sure that all of a suddenly this doesn't happen. And I want a commitment from FAA. We're actually going to see something. And I recognize that Favi has given that. I just don't know if we have to put it in or not.
I don't know if it helps you at all, Anita. A letter did go out more than 30 days in advance requesting the update on BSR at the next meeting.
Okay,
So
then
can we
never
leave
mind
that
what I
out of the
said.
motion
That's
then?
as best as you can
Okay.
do.
And Kathy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to go back. It's not on this issue, so
Oh, if we can
yep,
just go on,
yep.
because we've got a motion on the table?
Yep, go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you
Yep.
very much. So the motion on the table is to accept Carlos's entry by Steve and Carlos's approval with a friendly amendment from Glenn having to do with adding the strategic plan verbiage into this that Lisa has offered.
So can I just clarify? So I
Please.
just want to clarify that that would be added at the 1.1 level and not the 1.1.3 because it applies to all of the select committee recommendations.
Okay, that's why it ended up at the top of that page. Are we clear on, getting the thumbs up.
And then I heard two other friendly amendments, one having to do with the within 3 months and one having to do with the feedback.
And
In 1.1.3, just to be clear.
Thank you, and those were accepted by the two initiators of the motion, and so are we ready to vote, or do we need any further clarification? See no need for further clarification. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye and raise your hands too.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, Romina, good, I can see you. It passes unanimously. Thank you all. All right. Kathy, you wanted to speak about something else.
Well, going back to 3.6 and just some comments that were made. And I just want C to understand that I understand that this is economic growth for the airport, but my point is the noise impact, and that's where my concern is, and what this body can do as a whole in respect to that. I will add that you may be following Congresswoman Jackie Spear. She just initiated 8 legislative bills, having to do with airport noise and federal restrictions and also the FAA responding to members of Congress and local officials. I mean, just a variety of issues that, that this body talks about. But Chairwoman, I mean, I'd like to ask, what could this body do as a result in terms, I mean, do we send a letter as a whole just addressing these issues and let the City of Santa Clara take its own actions, or is there another recommendation?
All of the above?
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Does that clarify? Is there anything under 3.6 then that you are hoping to state, or are you just going to probably be asking for this to be raised as a priority?
Just asking it to be raised as a priority.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Quickly, we seem to have gotten, I hope, through 1.1, up to 1.2. Glenn, I had asked you if you wanted to include hitter on that somewhere in there. And you did. So I'm clarifying that for sure. So hitter will be included.
I think that becomes 1.2.3, Madam Chair.
Yes. Yes, I just wanted to clarify that that was in there. Okay.
And Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
can just say, on the several other ones I had, talking about the technical committee, the basic data committee, the monthly reports, I just wanted to go ahead and say, so maybe we don't have to try and get to the exact, granular detail. I'm okay with what we have in here. It's just as we move forward and define these things, I think we're going to have to do more work to try, or I would like to encourage to more work of what they are. It's not that I'm objecting to the languages necessarily that are there. It's just that I think it needs more stuff so we can, in a way to try and move forward.
Your sign was up, it came back down. Do you want to speak?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was our intention. Our
That was your
intention was that
intention.
this
Okay.
be enabling, not detail.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, did not see any notes that I made on 1.3. Sunny 1, 1.3.3. I did not have any notes. Speak up, anybody, if I'm missing something. 1.3.5. There was some discussion about achieving 100% airline compliance that I noted. Who said that, and is that something we should be addressing? That was something that we talked about at the last meeting.
Yeah, the wording that I have is, under desired outcomes, is achieving no non-conforming departures. That's
Sorry, would you
that's
say
pretty
that
close
again?
to 100%.
Yeah.
No non-conforming departures. That's the notes that I made.
It's a wonderful goal. Okay, people, are we putting that in there? Seriously, do we have a motion? Okay, are we putting it in there? I mean, I want to make sure that there's nobody saying no to this one, because it's a beautiful thing. All right, 2.0.
I want to be sure we know 1.3.6. I think Westla 4 goes there unless Steve decides that it belongs to be married back with the select committee under 1.1.
1.2.6. You're going to put it there? Okay,
1
good.
point, yeah, 1.3.6.
1.2.
1.3.
1.
It either goes under 1.3.6 or it goes,
3.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I did not hear correctly. All right. Good. 2.0. I think we went through that pretty well.
we're pretty good.
The only thing that I wanted, that a note that I made earlier on was just make sure that we have scrubbed that wherever we have noise, we also have environmental, because that reflects our strategic plan. All right. 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 we have left there. Confirmed.
Confirmed.
Then I believe it's 2.6.1, having to do with GBAS, and then we're rolling under that all the way through 2.6.2, I believe it is. And somewhere along the way, I'm expecting ESA to get my numbers right. 2.6.1 is left here. Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. That's where I'm having trouble. Thank you. And 3.0.
Madam Chair, if I might, there was a comment about in the second line of the main text, the word critical. I would suggest maybe to address the concern, maybe that should say important instead of critical. Would that be?
Sure. Any other discussion from anyone? Changing critical to important.
Sorry, Anita, can you repeat which item that's for?
Sure, I'm in
Sorry, page 10,
3.1. Not in the bold text, but in the beginning, the standard text on the second line that I have says Congress, comma, impact roundtable member communities, comma, it is, instead of critical, say the word important.
Okay, thank you.
We're good, Glenn? Not Glenn. He was the last face I saw as I turned. 3.2. I had something that under desired outcomes, it's not a big substantive thing. It's okay. Anita.
Yes.
Why didn't you catch me? On desired outcomes, bullet point 2, that starts collaborate where beneficial with the SFO community roundtable, not tables.
There's
a strike.
There's a strike in the roundtables.
Good.
And there's one after forums also.
Yes.
I think we're good.
Good. I'm just checking in with you.
You just want to make sure I'm awake.
Okay. 3.4. This is a big one. This has to do with the standing and ad hoc committees to increase effective use of roundtable members and staff. So we have struck establish in those two places of 3.4.1 and 3.4.2. Are there any other changes now?
Well, there are some ancillary changes because of that.
Yes, and
But
so for clarification.
I think we've got them.
We've got them. Is everyone comfortable with the changes and feels ready to move forward with the changes we made?
And I will commit to doing a final proofread of the final.
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone say anything. Steve, this is just for 3.4.
I'm just curious, I really can't see the screen that well on I'm just concerned about the basic data
Okay.
committee, and I want to speak against that being in a committee that we call,
Okay,
especially as an ad hoc committee.
Madam Chair,
Then if I may, I'm going to suggest that the way we approach this is that we first discuss 3.4.1, which has to do with what we are now calling a technical working group. Is that correct? Okay. And that is what is under discussion right now. I believe we made the change at the discretion of the roundtable chair, with the understanding that should that person not be available, that the vice chair is following up the technical working group. And so anybody, any comments on this particular paragraph? Everybody with me? Okay, good. I've actually got stars by the procedure parts, so at the very end of that. 3.4.2, we have removed establish A. Everyone okay on that? Good. Then we're moving forward.
Madam Chair, my only question about that paragraph is, should there be parallel construction with 3.4.1 and add to that at the direction of the roundtable chairperson, or is the roundtable comfortable with it the way it is?
I always like parallel construction. Any comment?
Anita, Lydia, or Lisa, any concern about that? Or?
well, I'm still hopeful that with respect to that one, it would be the roundtable giving direction rather than the chair, because it should be less urgency. The reason for doing the chair in the first one is because of urgency issues. The second one, I would hope, would be more deliberative and a core function of this body. So,
do you think we need to put at the
direction of the roundtable?
Of the full roundtable?
My only comment on that, if I may, is the concern of sometimes legislation pops up fast.
We can always, as a roundtable, task that the chair, that the committee be doing certain things in between if it's necessary. You can always do that.
I don't know how we task if we don't know what's coming into a stage where we need to. That it's just the timeliness factor that I'm concerned about.
Okay, well,
as Kathy said, we know that there are 8 pieces of legislation. I've actually tagged 5 that could be having something to do with us. Months ago, I was told that maybe we would want to endorse these kinds of things, but they're moving slowly. But what if they didn't move slowly? That's my concern.
congressional legislation don't move fast.
I know, but I just, with the 2 months' time, I'm not trying to put more load on a chair in any way, shape, or form. I would just like input on that.
At the direction of the roundtable and with exception at the direction of the chair.
Would you read that again, please, for everyone?
At the direction of the roundtable and by exception, and on exception by direction of the chair.
Sounds good to me. Any further conversation?
God,
okay.
That keeps them from going rogue.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, good. Thank you, Anita. Okay, 3.4.3.
I'd like to suggest a possible compromise here that would work, which would be to create a central data repository. And because I think that's ultimately what we're after, is having a consistent, growing, long-term place where the data that have been developed, the data that we need, data we've relied on, data that we might need in the future, has a place to be. And then we can leave for the future how we're going to populate that data repository. But every corporation that I know of has a database that they live with, live and die by. And it just seems to me we need that kind of a thing.
Steve, I need to look to you.
Madam Chair, I think that suggestion makes a lot of sense. I think we would need to decide where we would keep that. Would it live on the Roundtable website? That's a possibility, but it would make sense to have that. The one question I would have is, does the data just get dumped there, or does it come to the Roundtable reviews it and then says it makes sense to put this data into the repository?
I think we have to decide what goes into permanent repository. But that's just my opinion.
This is totally on the fly.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. As we are setting up our technical groups, and they are becoming aware of after we have the prioritization, and we become aware of what are our priorities, and I think once we become aware of our priorities, we may then understand better what technical data we may want. And Steve has said that this is something where we can adjust or alter our work plan. Yeah. And Steve Preminger has pointed out that this could, and this is something I'm aware of too, have a budgetary implication. This is a big ask on my part for the three of you who have worked so hard to put this together. But is this something that we could revisit once we have our priorities and we agree at this point that we have a database?
I'd be most comfortable if we actually had some enabling statement in here, but again, without necessarily fleshing out exactly the process by which data get added and all that kind of thing. That can all happen down the road.
Steve, do you have a suggestion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would suggest that we make 3.4.3, title that Central Data Repository, with the text below that saying create a central data repository for use by the Roundtable, period. The data shall be placed in the repository by approval of the full Roundtable.
Works for me.
Okay. Not seeing anybody fighting that.
I don't know if we need
So
to
far.
say full Roundtable, but just Roundtable.
Roundtable's fine.
Will that?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm just worried about the more we add, the less far we're going to be able to go down the road towards getting to some consensus conclusion by this body. And so I fight things that I think will take us down the wrong path.
And I appreciate that because part of the agenda for February includes budget, which will define a lot of what we are going to be capable of doing. So we can have our priorities, but they are going to be defined by the budget too. Okay, so we're good on that. 3.5. I have strike in place of with a question mark. Was there anything here that somebody wanted to have carried forward? There were notes that this, yeah. Where I am on this is we are here as representatives, each and every one of us, elected officials, well, and staff, as elected people who are representing our community. And we, as individual Roundtable members, would be failing in our job if we were not listening to our community. And so for me, I would welcome input from Darlene or from Jennifer or from Cheryl or any of you all as in my position on the Roundtable. And I would hope that each of you would too. And some of you have closer connections than others to community members. So I'm hoping that given our bylaws and what we were set up to do was to be representatives of the community who are accountable to the community by election, that we remove the idea that civilians will be actively involved in sitting in a venue, but not saying that they can't give their information. And I'd like feedback on that.
I think we struck that.
We did, so we're good.
We're good.
Okay, good. That's why I had strike in place of. Good, thank you. 3.6. 3.5.2. I noted we needed to return.
Hold on a second. Just to be clear, we struck 3.4.3. We did not strike 3.5.1. Is that what everyone understands?
So there will be a numbering. Are we good?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that 3.5.1 is staying as is. Okay.
Good.
Sorry, Glenn.
Well, now I have a comment to make about 3.5.1. Is that pre-next gen and post-next gen noise and flight data? Like, is that what you're saying stayed? Okay, so I'm just confused. I don't know how this is different than the repository we were just talking about. And this thing where it says, it kind of implies we're going to go get pre-next gen data. And I don't know how you do that, given that next gen is already, how you go find the detail level. If we want to just leave that and go here, that's just the way it's going to be. But I mean, I just don't know how we can, if we just want to leave it here and go, that's just kind of what it is, and I should ignore the detail of it, that it's not possible to do. But I actually don't think we have the pre-next gen actual data. There's a level of data that's out there, and if that's all anybody's talking about, that's fine. I've actually heard people say there should be a lot more, but if it's what it is, then I'm going to just pass, and I'm good.
Okay. Any other comments on 3.5.1? All right. We had asked to return to the monthly flight reports, 3.5.2. I had a question about whether San Jose would even share anything with us. I'm sorry, that was almost rhetorical. And hello, whoever you are from San Jose that's listening. Yes, I said it.
Chair, can I ask a question about that? Don't they have to provide reports to the San Jose City Council once in a while, every so often?
We have been told that they have a half a person, I think, that does something like that. Kathy, are you getting any texts? Steve, what do you know?
Yeah, Madam Chair, there's information that exists from the FAA on airport operations. We certainly can have basic information about the numbers of operations by air carrier, general aviation, that type of thing for an airport. Sometimes it's the more detailed information that an airport collects that might be more difficult to get if the airport doesn't want to share it. But in general, there would be, for all the airports, some basic level of operations information that would be available.
So do we leave this here as monthly flight reports, or do we, it is very separate from data, but it is also, I mean, there's a reason to have it separate from data, but it's also something that is data.
So, Madam Chair, this is one of the topics I talked about. I'm fine with the item staying as long as we realize, I think we need to figure out what reports we want. What are the things that via publicly available data or other data we can ask for? So it's kind of, I fit in the same bucket. I think it's fine to have the item as long as we acknowledge that we're going to have to go through and figure out at some point in time what it is that we want. Because just a report that says here basic number of air operations that occurred at an airport, I'm not sure is particularly helpful to the decision making we want to try and get to.
Very well, good. And everyone's agreed? Okay, we can move on with that idea in mind. Steve, do you see anything that we need to document there on that? No. Okay, good. 3.6. Kathy likes this. That's what my note says. Okay, 3.7. I don't see.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Again, my comments about this were, I think we should be much more specific. the example of what I heard Kathy talk about was people have issues with existing air noise. This, if we're going to talk about airport expansion, we should talk about what is the incremental piece about what it is, not necessarily going back to, is the airport there? I actually like the concept of saying here, let's try and understand the impact of growth. To me, it's not about airport expansion per se, it's about the procedures that go on. If the airport growth goes on and all the new flights were happening in the morning, that's a separate kind of question that we would want to go drill down into and have responses about than just saying here they have more gates. So that's what I'm trying to get the distinction between, or the members of the public have talked about here, a procedure gets implemented, but nobody said they were going to move a huge percentage of traffic onto it. That's the kind of things I would think we'd want to be more looking at is procedure growth or volume of procedure usage, as opposed to just saying airport expansion. I think it's a much more specific trying to get to the actual noise that the residents are experiencing, to me. So the concept of having something here where we're trying to deal with volume change, and that's really what it is, but it's of the procedure, it's not necessarily at the airport.
So Steve, my other note, besides the one on Kathy, said, ask you about roundtable parameters and how we define what we want in here. Is this something that we need to do today or something that we can leave open since this is a placeholder?
I think we could leave it open and define it later.
Good, thank you. 3.7, understand and publicize the noise complaint process. Again, I'm hoping that we can get San Jose to help us in that. 3.8, encourage community participation. Thank you, guys. Please, keep coming. Okay. And 3.9, schedule roundtable member orientation and training. I am going to do something that Anita does here. Yeah, and I hope I'm here okay. And it's 3.9, it's underneath the bolded part, and it's the sentence that begins, the roundtable benefits from ongoing training deemed critical for roundtable members to accomplish the work of the program and to be effective. It's because it's members to accomplish and members to be effective. And then moving on down to the first bulleted, a desired outcome. Members are sufficiently knowledgeable to contribute effectively to accomplish the work plan and to set future strategies.
Mea culpa, mea culpa.
So I am asking for the inclusion of 2 there and asking what the meaning of strategies is because it's in our work plan. Our strategies, okay word there for going forward, okay. Then I'm going to look to anyone else for adding any other training. I had 4 items. Does anybody else have anything before I speak? Okay. I appreciate all that's going on. I think they're a great summary. I was hoping that maybe sometime in the future we could actually look and understand at noise as a health issue.
Madam Chair, would it make sense to just add a catch-all that says, or as other training that can be identified? So that way, as things come up, you have a way to go ahead and bring that forward?
I would agree. I'm going to be real quick, though. I think airport expansion is something that we need to learn about, and I think we have missed unmanned systems and SSTs if necessary.
I'm cool with that.
And then as necessary. Okay, good. And as necessary. Okay. Yep. Thank you. 3.10, maintain website. We're good on that. And we have historical as required. And now we are on to priorities. Steve. I guess he has a call. Okay, yes, Anita, I hear you.
Do you want a motion to approve the work plan?
I think that's a good idea, although I have to look to Steve because I don't know if our priorities are within the work plan. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, Madam Chair, these are sort of high-level priorities, and I think they're fine having them in the work plan. The next step after this for the roundtable, once the work plan is approved, is to decide what the roundtable wants to do first, in what order, and to prioritize each of these items separately from these higher-level items. That doesn't have to happen at this meeting. It could happen at a future meeting, February, or some other point in time. But that's the next step in this effort, is to figure out, because ultimately, what the roundtable decides it wants to do first will prioritize how the budget gets spent and what gets looked at, those types of things.
Yes. So the only question I had to do with priority number 2 with the discussion we have just had about the data. We're going to create a repository. But down here it says, in accordance with 3.4, form 3 committees.
Yes, it would just be 2.
Okay. And so then we would be striking basic data collection ad hoc committee.
Throughout the document.
Throughout the document. And then I believe the next to the last line that starts with roundtable will set the legislative committee's annual. We need to scratch.
I think we
N.
changed that to initial.
Initial. Okay, thank you.
Are you with me, Evan?
Yep.
It's in priority 2. It's in the next to the last line, although that could have shifted with all what you did. Where just before where it says task list, there was the word annual. Change that to initial.
There you go.
So instead of legislative committees annual, say initial task list.
And then very finally on the document under appendix, Anita, you had asked status of actions taken prior to approval.
Of this work plan document.
Yes, and Kathy had asked that in priority 3, we add 3.6 to the list in the proper numerical order.
Correct.
Okay, good. We're all clear on that now?
And before Anita makes her motion, just to remind what we said earlier, there's additional text that we're going to add now based on your input. So that would be the basis of the motion, that it's approved, acknowledging that there's further refinement that ESA is going to do. And then ultimately, and again, it's the way you want to handle it, but perhaps it gets approved on a conditional basis, and then Anita offered to review, do a QA/QC of it, so we run it by her before it comes back to the roundtable.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
Agreement with that? Good? Okay, good.
So I move that we approve the work plan with the amendments made to date and including such additional words and modifications directed to ESA.
Second.
Glenn is the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Yay, team. Thank you all for your input. We did it. Okay, and we have 5 minutes now. And imagine we've got some speaker slips. Okay, and I need to get back to my agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I wanted to make one suggestion as we look towards, Steve was alluding to, we need to do a prioritization piece. Could I suggest that prior to the next meeting, that all of the items get sent out to us in some kind of spreadsheet so that I could have because I've made my own little right here, so I could go through and I could, before the meeting, actually prioritize and sequence what it was, how we wanted to prioritize, so that we all had kind of did a little bit of homework or thought before we got to the next meeting, because at whichever point we're going to have to go through and do the prioritization, having a worksheet where I could work from and we're all working from the same thing might be helpful.
And I think that's a great idea, and if I can add one tweak to it, it would be that with respect to anything that has a known schedule, the next trigger date for that item and what the trigger is be noted. So if there's a deadline for a procedure review, a deadline for an EIR, a deadline for comments, whatever, that date be noted, because I think for most of us, doing priorities is a combination of importance and urgency.
Got it. We have 4 minutes, folks. Can we actually end? I don't think so. No way. All right, first speaker slip that I have, Robert Holbrook. Item number 4, which is oral communication. Public comment. Speakers are limited to a maximum of 2 minutes or less. Depending on the number of speakers, roundtable members cannot discuss or take action on any matter raised under this agenda item. Go for it.
This is for your information. The EIR for the SJC expansion found that the environmental impacts of pollution are significant, but unavoidable, because even if no project is undertaken, the current facility can handle demand forecasted through 2037. That was true by a whisker. The forecasted growth would bring the current airport to 98.3% of its capacity in 2037. And the growth assumptions supporting that surprised me. Whereas passengers at SJC actually grew 61% in the 5 years from 2013 to 2018, that demand for the next 19 years is forecasted to grow only 57%, with airplanes operations even less. In fact, the 238,000 operations forecasted for 2037 is 10% less than the number of operations predicted by the current plan for 2027, 10 years earlier. I didn't find the capacity the airport can handle after the expansion, but that would be great to know. 3 other things quick. Boeing 737s comprise half the planes serving SJC. So I was sorry to read that the arrival noise of 737-8 MAX airplanes affects twice as many acres as the 737-800. Don't know about the other MAX airplanes. Airbus, on the other hand, is coming out with quieter engines, and the EIR expects a shift to them. It isn't clear if they will permit aircraft to arrive at night during curfew hours. Finally, the EIR refers to planes flying FAA-approved noise abatement flight tracks. I wonder if that includes the corridor over my house. If so, that'd be a little like eliminating federal capital gains taxes on all states but California, quadrupling it here and calling it a tax relief fee.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Cheryl Poland, followed by Ross Mayfield.
Hi, I just wanted to make a quick comment about the select committee recommendations, nothing to do with the work plan. The select committee recommendations were exactly that. They were recommendations. Those of you who participated or attended the select committee will remember that the FAA's directive to the select committee was, ask us for whatever you want and we will determine what is feasible from a safety and operational perspective. I believe it's the FAA initiative report dated July 2017, where they came back to each of the recommendations and stated it's feasible, it's not feasible, it's under evaluation. And I would highly recommend that you all look at this material because that is your guide for what the FAA are up to. And of course, you have them here to give you updates. So thank you to all of you for your service. Thank you to the FAA for your engagement. Thank you to our congressional reps for making all of this possible. And special thanks to Chair Bernald for her dedication to the community demonstrated by your time in the Select Committee and your leadership here at the Roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you. Ross Mayfield.
Hi, my name is Ross Mayfield. I'm with the Quiet Nights Initiative, which is just a tiny group of 500 people so far, and I'm a Palo Alto native. What we're seeking is just a specific focus on one issue, airplane noise at night, where there is the possibility of routing additional SFO arrival traffic over the bay with a better flight path of higher altitude. I see great progress in getting a work plan, in the possibility of working within the language that you have and the charter that you have for accomplishing this one goal. But it would be something different than being reactive to the changes, because there's always going to be new technologies and new routes and so forth. And so I wasn't planning on making a comment today, but what I'd hope would be we could make this part of the agenda within the framework and work plan that you have, so the roundtable could task the technical working group with proposing alternative solutions for specifically this issue, which is keeping up a lot of community members at night.
Thank you. Darlene?
Action tracking. I spoke in December about the need for tracking actions, and at the meeting, Steve had briefly shared the action status tracking matrix, which is now posted on the website. This is a big step in the right direction. I want to thank Steve. I noticed the document currently solely tracks motions voted by the roundtable, and it doesn't track actions that are agreed to by the FAA, so I would encourage these to be captured in the future. For example, Favia agreed at the October meeting to share the procedure development process for the SUNY, since it was not a typical PBN procedure. I also have 3 helpful suggestions. Right now, the actions are listed generically as an FAA letter. It would be nice to list the procedure that was applicable to the letter, and in the comments to say what is still outstanding and the date the letter was sent to the FAA. Right now, the 4 items in there do not show the topic. It does not say if the roundtable is waiting for the FAA. It does not say when the roundtable or letter went out. So lastly, where is the FAA? And I mean that by technical experts. The last time they gave a presentation was August 28th, which was 5 months ago. My understanding is they were going to come every 2 months. So we have all these topics, and they're just going to keep backing up and backing up. So did the roundtable send the presentation or questions to the FAA? Did the FAA receive the questions and they are not coming? This should be transparent to all of us. We should know where things are held up. So action tracking is critical to work towards reducing aircraft impacts. Please consider incorporating these suggestions for transparency and effectiveness.
Thank you, Darlene. Mauricio Fremont.
So I have a couple of suggestions for you to consider in terms of communication processes with the FAA. So the first one is I'd like for you to ask the FAA to send their materials at least a week before they present to this roundtable, because this would make these meetings way more effective and for everyone. And this is, I think, a reasonable request, given that the request and the question that this roundtable sends to the FAA, they're sent way more than 30 days in advance, and often the FAA takes multiple months to respond, so it's feasible and it's reasonable. The second suggestion would be about the questions that are sent from the roundtable to the FAA. And I have one in particular. I'd like to understand on the Big Sur overlay why the roundtable on January 17 didn't send any specific questions to the FAA when they address when they give an update on the Big Sur overlay, hopefully in February. The request was just to provide an update. And I had outlined some questions in my 3 questions in my December 8 email. It was on the page 117 of the December packet. So yes, let's have an update from the FAA on the Big Sur overlay. And let's also ask some specific questions, for instance, my 3 questions that I had offered, because we have the FOIA information. We're not starting from scratch. So let's leverage the information we have. So I would like for you to ask to submit these 3 questions, or if you have better questions, go ahead, from my December email. There's still time. We're 35 days before the February 26th meeting. And as you know, asking questions is an art. This is not our first rodeo on this one. And it would be really a shame to not have these questions addressed at the next meeting and have to wait another few months to get another response from the FAA next time they present on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Jo. Jennifer Landisman.
Hi, I'm going to weave everything together here. I fully support the Quiet Nights initiative. It's consistent with everything that the Select Committee worked on, and I agree with Cheryl. There is something to look into at the wonderful Select Committee report, and nighttime noise is a big issue. About data, first of all, I want to say I'm not an expert. There are engineers, data scientists that have the data. I'm guilty of actually holding things up during the Select Committee because I refuse to endorse anything that was not vetted in terms of noise or safety, because I said, I'm not an airspace surgeon. I was asked to sign a letter and say, here, approve this one. I'm going, who am I? And so I think the FAA are the safety and flyability, and they have their programs and everything to look at things. In terms of noise, this is a growing area, a growing field. And it ties very much into policy because, for example, if you don't have the data, you can't inform policy. One of the issues that you can be a leader on is, for example, using more metrics than DNL. You could choose to use N above 65. That counts how many operations are going over a certain area that are over 65 dB. It's an approved metric by the FAA. The FAA is not going to say, oh, you cannot discuss this metric. They might be able to say other things, but they're not prohibiting discussions. And I want to thank FAA for saying that you are willing to receive input, because the story here is that there are a lot of people that are going to be left with zero noise, but there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be left with a lot of issues that sustain. And, you know, we're all having benefits from the airports, but there's going to be a group of people that is going to be sustaining all the disbenefits. And I'm glad that FAA, I don't think there's a conflict. I think you're just as interested in seeing how you can have a sustainable system where you do things and at the same time consider noise. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy Mulcahy. And my last card is from Jennifer T.
Hey, I wasn't planning on speaking either, but I just wanted to make a point. At the very first Select Committee meeting in Santa Cruz, it was so impressive, everyone showing up. We listened to Glenn Martin from the FAA talking about the redesign in our skies and making our lives all better, people's lives all better from this redesign. It clearly didn't. And I asked at that time, and I ask it again now, they say necessity is the mother of all invention. If the FAA had used metrics, if they did put noise and noise pollution and particulate pollution as the second priority over efficiency, over the airlines, what would that design of our sky look like? And I think that's a fundamental question, because as they go back and they're looking at the Big Sur, they're looking at other waypoints, they're looking at anything, they should be looking at it from that perspective. Otherwise, we're going to just, every time the public, we're all going to be on the defense. There would be community building. There would be trust if we heard from the horse's mouth that the issue, the second priority, is noise and particulate pollution for the safety for the public and not the airlines. So please apply in your design. They may not be approved by Congress. Nobody's forcing the FAA to do it, but design with the noise metrics and pollution particulate standards of today.
Thank you, Tammy. Jennifer T. And then Alistair, are you indicating you want to speak after that? Okay.
what Kathy Watanabe said about the airport's San Jose expansion is right on. Airports cannot control the flight paths. FAA controls that. Airports cannot stop the planes from using the airport, but they can control the expansions. It is the one thing that they have control of. The one thing. They can't control anything else. San Jose is already impacted at peak times. They are. And so these expansions that they're proposing are going to place a lot more planes into the air, whether we think that or not. That is going to happen. And there's a lot of money at stake here, $27.5 million per new gate. San Jose is going to go forward on this because there's $180 million if they put 6 new gates, but it's going to be on our backs, the residents' backs. That is not right. And it's going to spew tons of greenhouse gases into the air. So South Flow is bad right now, and a lot of people are impacted. We know that. During the ad hoc committee meeting, San Jose Airport blocked any discussion of an east approach that would help South Flow. They decide on the expansions. They make millions of dollars. They need to take the brunt of this increase on flights. They are blocking every improvement on South Flow, yet they are making millions of dollars on this. And I'll tell you, these expansions are going to take place immediately. There was a meeting, council meeting in January, and when Aiken was talking about it, they were talking about going for proposals almost immediately. This is not talking about 2037. This is immediate if the economy stays as it is. We need a strong response to the San Jose Airport. We need to be strong here. This is a problem.
Thank you, Jennifer. Alistair?
Hi, thanks again for the opportunity to speak. Since much of the meeting was taken up with discussion of
Alistair, can you pull the mic up? You're a little bit taller than everyone else.
There we go.
Thank you.
Sure. Since much of the meeting was taken up with discussions of data and technical groups, I thought a particular test case might be on point as a way of checking that process. The following statement appeared in an August letter to the Santa Cruz Sentinel. It is incontrovertible that the proposed shift will concentrate all traffic over a narrower area of the county and shift noise over more county residents. Now, that statement is either true or false. The basis for it being true is census count data for Santa Cruz County and statements released by the FAA and reports about how vectoring patterns are, and I'll send those around for reference again. It would be very beneficial to have feedback from the roundtable about whether that is a true statement or a false statement. If it's false, it would be nice to know whether the FAA data was misleading or the census data cannot be relied on. If it's true, it will be very relevant in how this change is accepted by county residents who will be affected by it. I also wanted to say something about, since the issue of the immutability of the recommendations has come up, the select committee recommendations, there's some history here, which I think Cheryl related to earlier. In the FAA released after the vote information about the fact that not all the recommendations were feasible, and the 1.2R2 recommendations. We tend to focus on 1.2R1 and not on our 1.2R2. On the basis of that, the city of Los Altos Hills retracted its vote in 3 successive letters. Major regional changes should not turn on a miscommunication. Basically, the roundtable should be prepared to accept the fact that the fiction that what was voted on in November 2016 is immutable is not a good basis for policy. There will be changes, and there should be an opportunity to assess consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has not turned in a slip who would like to, and who has not spoken who would like to speak? Thank you. Then we will close oral communications. It is now item number 5. Are there any items that the members of the roundtable would like to speak to? Anita.
Madam Chair, you and Kathy both mentioned legislation. Is it possible to send around a list of the proposed bills we can do the research on our own?
Sure. You might even be able to find them on Anna Eshu's website or Jackie Spears' website. Or they've all have co-sponsored it. So, yes, yes, yes.
And what's the location of our next meeting?
Here, going forward. The February meeting is February 22nd, I believe. 6th, thank you. Oh, yes. I can remember that. You can bring cake and cards, people. It's okay. Um, We got to have a good time, right? All right. So the February meeting, I wanted to let you know that, and Darlene, and I think a couple of you had questions. The letters have been sent to the FAA regarding BSR. We are expecting to have Sky here, also for Sunny, and possibly for Pirate if there is something to report, and because it's sort of in a funny stage right now. But those are the requests that we have made as, through, with me signing as a chair and Steve forwarding them. It's going to be a busy time, as it always is. There will definitely be budget and the implications. We need to be reviewing our bylaws because that's the time to review the bylaws. There will be the election of the chair and the vice chair. And I'm going to ask that if there is interest over the time period between now and the next meeting, that if you have interest in potential subcommittees, that you submit your names. All takers are welcome. So, as I said, a very, very busy meeting. It's my understanding, Favi, that Sky will be here. We are now going into up until June, again, with every other month. That has to do with budget to some extent and for our own sanity, I would like to think. That means that should we have questions for the FAA, that we will have plenty of time to get letters to them for the next meeting, the subsequent meetings. So keep that in mind. And Steve, is there anything else that I am failing as a chair report to mention?
No.
No, yay, okay. We can have public comment on that discussion, but if we all want to go home, it's fine with me.
Chair, may I just ask a question? Just a question?
Yes.
So based on what you said, we will be looking into subcommittees at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
Legislative and
Yeah.
technical, okay.
Yes, yes. And if you have ideas of what you want to be serving on. With that in mind, I think it'll lend an air of legitimacy if we have as many people as possible from around the area, not just a concentrated area, apply for a technical working group in Sunny or South Flow or something like that. So it'll further our credibility, I think, with the reports that come out. I will not say anything more. Steve?
Madam Chair, the roundtable approved the work plan.
Yay. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Everybody. Thank you very much. I will see you on February 26th in exactly the same place. Same time. Bad state.